From all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here soon to be with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. He is stuck in traffic, so Ben is holding down the box today. Appreciate your support, Ben. Today on the show, longshoremen wrapped up their strike with a huge 60% raise. If you're not in a union, you're leaving money on the table. We break down the District 1 runoff and, of course, bring you Last Week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, well, you're going to have to find us on YouTube and Facebook and participate in our live chat. Because, unfortunately... Sorry, my computer was not unmuted. Oh, my computer was not muted. Unfortunately, we have not figured out what's going on with the call system. It is just totally bizarre. It's being very strange. I think what we'll do in the second half of the program is we'll just drop the Zoom link into Facebook chat, and we'll bring people in via Zoom, because I would like to bring callers on. So that's probably what we'll be doing. But yeah, the phones are weird. Phones are being weird, so we're going to try to figure out what's going on. But you can always leave us a voicemail. If you're listening to us as a podcast, or you're catching the stream after it is live, you can still call and leave us a voicemail at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can leave a voicemail throughout the week, and we might respond to it on the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm, but you can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time contribution, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/the Valley Labor Report. We have a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. We got our logo dad cap that I'm wearing right here. Some of our Join a Union tees left, and pre-orders open for our union-made matchboxes and a new t-shirt that says Unionize, but it looks like the Supreme logo. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
And let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their authors and do not necessarily represent any organization or our sponsors. We welcome all our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio from right here, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. As most of you know, we're not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who believe that Alabama and the South's labor movement and the working class deserve a bigger platform. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we could not do it without you guys. We are doing the fund drive right now, just so everyone knows. I think we have a goal of 10K right now still. You can find that at tvlr.fm/union 2024. We'll probably have more news and updates on that coming up too. But I believe that's about it for me, so Jacob, go ahead and take it away.
All right. So with that, here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from September 20th to October 4th. This is a 2-week roundup since we were pre-taped last week, so lots to get to. In new union campaigns, nearly 3,000 workers across 18 bargaining units are in new union campaigns. 466 workers across 3 units are in new decertification drives. 35 workers at Kloeckner Metals in Charlotte, North Carolina, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Steelworkers, USW. 13 workers at Starbucks in Norman, Oklahoma, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United, as did 15 more in Atlanta, Georgia, 21 more in Fredericksburg, Virginia, 20 more in Norfolk, Virginia, and 15 more in Bossier City, Louisiana. 2,200 workers at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, filed a petition to hold a union election with Vanderbilt Graduate Workers United, VGWU-UAW. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 84 workers at Faurecia Emissions Control Systems in Arlington, Texas, demonstrated support for unionization with the United Auto Workers. 34 workers at United Plumbing Company in Goshen, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters, UA Local 502. 202 workers at University Medical Center New Orleans filed a petition to hold a union election with National Nurses United. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 2 workers at Nail City Painting in Wheeling, West Virginia, demonstrated support for unionization with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, IUPAT District Council 53. Workers likely pushed by their employers filed a petition to decertify the National Conference of Firemen and Oilers, NCFO-SEIU, Chapter 320, as the union representing 207 workers at Cardinal Aluminum in Louisville, Kentucky. 150 workers at First Student, a school bus company in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, Local 1546. This could potentially start a turf war with the Teamsters, who have a national contract with the company. It'll be interesting to see what plays out there. 14 workers at American Electric Power Texas in Pearsall, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 738, as did 12 more workers at the Eagle Pass, Texas location. Workers likely pushed by their employer, along with help from the National Right to Work Foundation, filed a petition to decertify the Office and Professional Employees International Union, OPEIU, as the union representing 207 workers at Find Help in Austin, Texas. 53 workers at Atlanta Gas Company in Atlanta, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with IBEW Local 1997. 47 workers at Windstream Services in Sugar Land, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Communication Workers of America, CWA. 2 workers at United Natural Foods in Sarasota, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 16 workers at Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits in Farmers Branch, Texas, demonstrated support for unionization with the Teamsters Local 745. 13 workers at Aquila Food Distribution in Mercedes, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 455. 22 workers at Frontier Strategies in San Antonio, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the OPEIU Local 4873. Security guards filed a petition to decertify the Security Police and Fire Professionals of America, SPFPA, as the union representing 52 guards at Defense Contracting Activity and Paragon Systems as joint employers. In campaign updates, in July, Compass Coffee workers voted in union elections at multiple locations across Washington, D.C. You will remember, though, that the company hired dozens of new employees just before the election at each location, including lobbyists for Uber, which very strange that these high-paid lobbyists want to be baristas for no reason at all. So the election results were not determinative due to the amount of challenged ballots. The union said that these people who were hired specifically to fill the unit with anti-union workers were not eligible to vote in the election. While workers wait for the NLRB to make a decision on the eligibility of certain voters, the company continues to retaliate against pro-union workers, having fired 2 more in the last week. The union has set up a hardship fund to raise money for their fired members. The Teamsters announced that they have grown the union by 50,000 workers in the last 2.5 years since Sean O'Brien was elected to the general presidency. In election results, 1,234 workers across 18 bargaining units are newly unionized. 153 workers in 3 units voted against unionization, and 47 workers decertified their union, and 64 workers withdrew their petition for an election. Workers at the Monongalia County Assessor's Office in West Virginia voted in favor of unionization with the United Mine Workers of America, UMWA, and now the union reports that workers in other departments of the county commission have expressed interest in unionizing. The county commission is so far not inclined to allow the workers in these other departments to vote on a union election, since public sector employees in West Virginia don't have to by law, but that was also the initial stance of the assessor's office, so we'll see if the commission changes their mind. 20 workers at WLRN in South Florida withdrew their petition for a union election with SAG-AFTRA after they were voluntarily recognized by their employer. 217 workers at Unity Healthcare in Washington, D.C. voted 123-9 in favor of unionization with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME. 122 workers at MBM Logistics in Orlando, Florida voted 60-47 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 385. 7 security guards at Secure Remedy in Washington, D.C. voted 1-0, very low turnout in that election, in favor of unionization with the National Capital Union for Security Officers, NCUFSO. 40 workers at the National Alliance of State and Territorial AIDS Directors, NASTAD, voted 26-3 in favor of unionization with the Washington Baltimore News Guild, WBNG CWA, Local 32035. 9 workers at BFS Group in Shelbyville, Kentucky voted 5-4 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters, Local 89. 21 workers at Veolia Water Services of North America in Tampa, Florida voted 10-8 in favor of unionization with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 30. 29 workers at Barter Theater in Abingdon, Virginia voted 4-21 against unionization with the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, IATSE. 20 workers at Transdev Services in West Palm Beach, Florida voted 17-3 in favor of unionization with ATU, Local 1577. 16 workers at Live Nation in Aberdeen, Kentucky voted 8-0 in favor of unionization with IATSE, Local 17. 166 workers at Breakthrough Beverage in Jacksonville, Florida, voted in favor of unionization with the Teamsters, Local 947, as did 166 more workers at Fort Myers, Florida, with Teamsters, Local 79, 166 more workers at the Tampa, Florida location with the same local, and another 160 workers in Orlando. 47 workers at Waste Management of Tennessee in Memphis, Tennessee, voted 40-4 in favor of decertifying the Teamsters, Local 667, as their union. 12 workers at UPS in Louisville, Kentucky, voted 5-7 against unionization with the Teamsters, Local 89. 4 workers at Kentucky Power in Pikeville, Kentucky, voted 3-0 in favor of unionization with IBEW, Local 978. 46 workers at AEP Texas in Laredo, Texas, voted 40-4 in favor of unionization with the IBEW, Local 738. 95 workers at HMS Ferries in Ceiba, Puerto Rico, voted 33-59 against unionization with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 17 workers at Science Applications International Corporation in Leesburg, Virginia, voted 5-9 against unionization with IAMAW. 17 workers at Starbucks voted 10-7 in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United, as did 23 in Nashville, Tennessee. They voted 17-1 in favor of unionization. 14 in Alpharetta, Georgia, voted 11-1 in favor of unionization. 64 workers at Rivers Portsmouth Gaming in Portsmouth, Virginia, withdrew their petition for a union election with the Teamsters, Local 822. In settlements, grievances, and unfair labor practices, workers at Hyatt Place in Austin, Texas Airport voted to unionize on July the 10th. Since then, instead of negotiating in good faith for a first contract, the company has fired 2 workers. Bernie Sanders and Texas Congressman Greg Casar led a small delegation of political leaders and workers in confronting hotel management and telling them to respect workers' rights. In strikes and bargaining updates, the International Longshoremen's Association, ILA, went on strike last week, and anti-worker forces in the Democratic and Republican parties really let the mask slip. Alabama Governor Ivey said, quote, big labor was, quote, exploiting Alabamians, and Florida Governor DeSantis announced intentions to bring in the National Guard to do longshore work. Fortunately, thanks in part to Biden's refusal to invoke Taft-Hartley to break the strike, and Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg's interventions, but mostly due to the withholding of ILA's labor, the companies came to their senses and offered the union a deal that they could agree to, with a tentative agreement on wages of about 62% over 6 years and protections against automation. We'll get into more details about the strike later in the show. The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, Local 1624, is blasting the $218 million tentative agreement that the city of Austin, Texas has reached with just the police union as too expensive, potentially leaving other departments to face cuts. Kansas City Tenants Union just began a rent strike against 2 properties, demanding rent caps, new owners, and collectively bargained leases. After authorizing a strike, the Teamsters reached a tentative agreement with Hertz, the car rental company, covering some 3,000 workers in several states, including Texas. The agreement will now be put to a vote of the members. Food workers at Sodexo Fannie Mae in Virginia with Unite Here Local 23 won a first contract that the union says contains higher wages, health care, new job rights, and more paid time off. Food workers at Aramark Georgetown Law in D.C. with the same union also ratified a new contract that the union states contains raises, parental leave, a pension, and better language on equity. United Launch Alliance, ULA, in Decatur, Alabama, whose machinists are unionized with the IAMAW Local Lodge 44, successfully completed another launch, which is good news for the workers 6 months out from contract negotiations. In political and legislative updates, a federal judge said that transit unions in the state of Florida must be exempt from the notoriously anti-union SB 256 due to a federal law that mandates collective bargaining rights for some transit workers for states and municipalities to be able to receive federal funds. Construction of new factories in the U.S. has hit a 50-year high thanks to investments from the CHIPS and Science Act. The International Association of Firefighters are touting the work that their members are doing across the Southeast in response to Hurricane Helene. IBEW linemen in Alabama are similarly engaging in this kind of recovery work, for which they received probably the first ever positive mention of a union in the history of Yellowhammer News, a right-wing rag in Alabama. Florida's minimum wage just increased to $13 an hour, but they don't have a Department of Labor or any other authority tasked with ensuring that bosses actually follow the law. The International Association of Firefighters also announced that they will not be making an endorsement in the 2024 presidential election. This comes as a change from their initial position, where they were one of the first unions to come out with an endorsement of Biden. In internal union affairs, 5,000 tradeswomen gathered in New Orleans for the 14th annual Tradeswomen Build Nations Conference with the support of the North American Building Trades Unions, NABTU. The Service Employees International Union, SEIU, has committed to spending $50 million to organize the South over the next 6 years. We did skip a few of the updates that we will be including in next week's Last Week in Southern Labor Roundup because there was just so much other stuff, particularly we'll be bringing in the last month of public sector updates from Florida from McKenna Schuler's newsletter, Caring Class Revolt. You can find that at caringclassrevolt.org. Friend of the show, McKenna Schuler, does a great job. And that is it for Last Week in Southern Labor this week. If we missed anything, you can let us know at tvlr.fm/contact. We're going to take a short break. We're going to be right back, and we're going to break down this situation with the Longshore strike that lasted about 3 days and got 45,000 workers a 62% raise. Stay tuned.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you.
Sinyard Law. And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam, or soon to be with my co-host Adam Keller, who's still stuck in traffic. Hopefully he's doing all right. If you've got anything to add, you can join us on Facebook or YouTube in the live chat and participate. Appreciate everybody watching there. If you are catching this after we are live, you can leave us a voicemail at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Like I said earlier, not sure. We don't understand what's going on with the phones. So in the second half of the program, I do want to try to bring some folks on. So we're just going to drop the link to the Zoom in the chat, so folks can join us that way. I think that's what we're going to do, but we got a bunch of stuff that we want to get to in the first half of the program, so not going to have time for calls there. So if you want to join us in the second half of the show, you want to participate, then find us on YouTube and Facebook after we get off the air, and you'll be able to participate that way. Appreciate everybody joining us in the chat. Praise the Sun says, Jack Welch's only innovation was ripping the copper wire out of existing institutions for short-term gains, which is an insane thing to reward in any system that isn't capitalism. And he's referring to the fact that the lead on our YouTube stream is this man is responsible for 30,000 machinists striking at Boeing Jack Welch. And that is referring to a segment that we're going to be doing in the second half of the program with friend of the show, Chris Townsend, who is a 25-year alum of UE, the United Electrical Workers, which is the union that represented many thousands of GE workers and had the most direct experience with Jack Welch. And it's relevant to the Boeing strike in the Pacific Northwest because Jack Welch, his management philosophy really proliferated throughout American capitalism and is responsible, many say, for the degradation of Boeing as a reliable engineering company. We're going to talk some about that in the second half of the show, so make sure that you stay tuned. It'll be with Chris Townsend. Really looking forward to that conversation. He is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm excited to have the conversation. Going to be breaking down the Longshore strike here in just a moment. Had a quick international story I wanted to share with you. Unions representing over 100 million workers internationally are alleging that Israel is violating a global treaty with its treatment of Palestinian workers since October the 7th and could potentially have stolen billions of dollars from them in unpaid wages. So prior to October the 7th, some 200,000 Palestinians from Gaza or the West Bank worked formally or informally in Israel, earning between the equivalent of $565 and $700 U.S. These workers were crucial economic pillars for their families, a role which was suddenly stripped from them after October 7th, an event that they had nothing to do with, let's remember. In commentary around the complaint, the unions also mentioned the destitution that this unemployment has caused. Stephen Cotton, the General Secretary of the International Transport Workers Federation, ITF, had this to say: Israel's illegal occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip has splintered the Palestinian economy for decades, causing an over-reliance on the Israeli labor market. The sudden unemployment of Palestinians working in Israel has left hundreds of thousands destitute. As we work towards a lasting peace, Israel should consider reopening its labor market to Palestinian workers, said ITF General Secretary Stephen Cotton. Other international labor leaders in the press release echoed these sentiments. The complaint itself, however, is on much more narrow, though still quite large, issue of the much more narrow but still large issue of unpaid wages for work performed prior to October 7th of last year. After the unilateral, non-negotiated termination of these work contracts, communication between the Palestinian workers and their former Israeli employers has all but ceased, leaving the Palestinian workers with no way to secure the wages owed to them for work, remember, that they already performed. It is to remedy that situation that 10 global trade unions representing some 207 million workers in 160 countries filed a complaint with the International Labor Organization, ILO. That is a United Nations agency tasked with promoting decent work and working conditions among member countries, of which Israel is one. Of course, the theft of billions of dollars may seem like a small thing when compared to the killing of at least 40,000 people in Palestine and the attempt to escalate the assault on Gaza into a broader regional conflict, which I'm sure is totally coincidental to the timing of the U.S. presidential election, in which these escalations will hurt Kamala Harris and help Trump, the preferred candidate of Netanyahu and company, even though this is actually almost certainly not a coincidence. For anybody that has a brain, it was completely foreseeable, and the Biden-Harris administration have no one to blame but themselves for not putting an end to this sooner. But so hopefully this issue of the stolen wages of Palestinian workers will be resolved and be resolved quickly. Let's get to the longshoremen strike. So like I said, dock workers struck, 45,000 of them, and struck and won big. A 62% raise over 6 years, with protections against automation to be negotiated in full between now and January 15th. The International Longshoremen's Association, ILA, the union that represents those 45,000 striking workers, called off the 3-day strike after reaching this tentative deal. Reportedly, the companies received significant pressure from Transportation Secretary Buttigieg and Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su to come closer to the workers' demands. Originally, the workers were demanding a 75% 27% wage increase, and originally the companies were only offering less than 40% wage increase. Obviously, very, very different starting positions. Again, let's remember that's over 6 years. During that 3 days, though, we saw some of the most absolutely unhinged anti-worker BS from Republicans and even some blue MAGA type Democrats that I want to respond to, because it absolutely just totally it grinded my gears so much. I was on vacation last week at Disney World, had a great time, but the first day of the strike, I was just totally consumed by the nonsense that I saw on Twitter, and I just could not stop refreshing the screen because I was like, how many people are this insane? It was really, really grinding my gears. So let's start here in Alabama with our own governor who, as is typical for her, stood up for out-of-state, out-of-country owners over her own constituents, saying in part, Alabamians who want to work and provide for their families, but once again, Alabamians want to work and provide for their families, but once again, big labor is exploiting them. Now, that's going to come as a shock to the Alabamians at the Port of Mobile who were striking as members of the ILA. It's going to come as news to them that they are being exploited by their union that they are striking with. It's going to be very strange news to them. But fortunately, the governor understands the situation better than they do, the people that actually work the ports. She continues, if the ILA was genuinely fighting for their workers, they would be at the table negotiating for them, which they were. What are you it's crazy. They'll just say anything. She continues, they have chosen to hold hostage our economy, American consumers, and its own workers that they claim to support. Now, again, their own workers would be surprised to learn that they were, quote, taken hostage since they are the ones that willingly struck, and they are the ones that got over a 60% raise out of it. That's a very interesting example of exploitation, right? When I think of being exploited, I don't think of, I'm going to make, about 1.5 times what I do now out of this exploitation. That's very, that's just not what I think of. But again, I've got Kay Ivey to explain it to me, right? So
thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness for Kay Ivey. And it's just so effing gross that this is coming, let's remember, in defense of literal foreign companies, right? These are not even American companies. These are not even American capitalists that she is defending here. She is defending foreign capitalists over Alabama workers. Every single dollar that they got as a raise in this contract is dollar that is being pulled from these international capitalists down to the Alabamian economy. Every dollar that they would not have gotten if Biden had followed her suggestion and invoked Taft-Hartley to stop the strike, and they hadn't gotten this raise, every single dollar that they would not have gotten would have gone overseas into the pockets of these foreign French and European capitalists. And that's how does an Alabama governor support that? That's easy. It's easy if you understand what's actually going on, that she doesn't care about Alabamians. She cares about the elite that make up her donor class, right? The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the National Association of Manufacturers, among several prominent Republicans, like Kay Ivey, called on Biden to invoke Taft-Hartley. And to his credit, he strongly rebuked those calls, saying, quote, I don't believe in Taft-Hartley. Reminds me of UMWA International President Cecil Roberts saying at the Alabama AFL-CIO convention that we need to repeal Taft-Hartley. So, it's just very frustrating stuff. And this was coming from all corners of the supposedly now pro-worker Republican Party, right? That's what we're hearing all the time. I am incessantly hearing about how Republicans are now the party of labor. Republicans are now the party of labor, despite the fact that basically any Republican politician of relevance was calling on Biden to invoke Taft-Hartley to break this strike. But they're the party of labor. They're the party of labor.
3 days, too. It took only 3 days.
Exactly, right? Exactly. It's just so frustrating. DeSantis was making noises that he was going to bring in the National Guard. He was going to bring in the National Guard to scab on Floridian workers for the benefit of international capitalists. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. Like I said, though, look, I hate these people. They fill me with, I believe, righteous fury. But these freaks on the right were not the only ones being weird about it. There were several, quote, like blue MAGA types, right? Democratic Party cultists who were also doing some really weird stuff, right? They were circulating a picture of the ILA international president with Harold Daggett. The ILA international president, Harold Daggett, with Donald Trump from a year ago, where the Daggett had a meeting with Trump, along with a hashtag, quote, Trump Longshore strike, right? As if the ILA has been planning this with Donald Trump to destroy the economy to help Biden, or to help Trump, right? To hurt Biden, to hurt Harris, to help Trump. And that's just not the way. That's just not, there's zero evidence for that. And it is absurd. And it is completely, now that the strike is over, right? Completely completely contradicted by the evidence, right? They only went on strike for 6 days after the companies came closer to what they were asking for. They didn't even get everything they were asking for, remember? But the companies came closer, and so the union called off the strike. If this was really a plan that they had hatched up with Trump, they would not have stopped the strike. They would have kept going, right? Because the economy ultimately, after only 3 days, there's not going to be any lasting effects, right, from this strike. And but it was crazy seeing these supposedly liberal people just absolutely losing their minds over this strike because ostensibly it was going to hurt Biden. But now actually, this is going to be helpful for Biden and Harris, because they were able to brandish their pro-union bona fides by not breaking the strike, and they were able to, and now the union has been able to get this huge raise in part due to them not breaking the strike, right? So this is really ultimately, the blue MAGA Democratic Party cultists should really be like looking in the mirror and feeling ashamed of themselves. They were also making a lot of arguments about how, these people are overpaid. We'll get into that here in a moment. Most of these folks were no names or like minor Twitter celebrities, right? But nevertheless, their attacks on the longshoremen garnered tens of thousands of likes on the platform. One common theme was about how the ILA represented, quote, the white working class. And that's why they supposedly support Trump, even though, again, the union has not endorsed Trump. And we're supposedly trying to help him. Ben, can you show me this picture of the longshore workers? Let's put this up on the stream so that people can see these privileged white longshore workers, because I think it's really important that we understand what's going on here. So that's for people that are only listening on audio, this is a picture of the Charleston ILA local that is basically 100% black, actually. If you can believe it. These are not privileged white workers that are trying to support Donald Trump. This is actually, in Charleston at least, I mean, seriously, look at this picture. You can't see it if you're not looking at it. It's almost 100% black. So that's just the Democratic Party types. So frustrating. I just cannot, I cannot express to you how frustrating it has been for me over the last week. Well, I've been trapped. Did they not know? Did these Democratic Party cultists not know that Jacob Morrison was on vacation? I was trying to have a good time, and they were ruining it. ruining it.
Oh, no.
I know. Nobody was thinking about me. It's crazy. We're going to get into some more of the details of the workers' compensation later. But before we do that, because it's important to set the scene with this, let's listen to ILA President Harold Daggett explain how much money the owners are making.
Back then, the companies were lucky they made millions of dollars, to 10 million, 5 million. Today, they make billions and billions of dollars. They make, MSC is the richest shipping company in the world, made 3 times the money than Amazon. A lot of money, right? Billions. Well, one of the companies, and I won't mention his name, he took himself a Christmas bonus, $4 billion. He took it out for him and his family, $4 billion. A French company, I won't mention their name, they gave all their employees 50 months' salary as a Christmas gift. Now, look at that money. They have so much money, they don't even know what to do with it. They know they're building.
They have so much money, they don't even know what to do with it, right? And so if you can listen to that, and then you hear, let's even just stipulate, which is not true, and we'll get into it momentarily. Let's even just stipulate that the average longshore worker makes $200,000 for working a normal schedule. Okay, we'll get into how that's not true, but let's even just stipulate that. Even if that were true, they would have still been justified in striking to get more because of how much money is on the table, right? The question is not how much value is being created. Is their work valuable enough to pay them more, right? It obviously is. The question is, who is reaping the benefits of the value that these workers are creating? And when we're in a situation when one person can get a multi-billion-dollar bonus, not even as regular as a bonus, okay, I have absolutely less than zero interest in hearing about how the workers have it too good. Just not remotely interested in that conversation. Now, some people have mentioned Daggett's own salary, the ILA International president, which comes out to about $900,000 a year. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. But do you know how many times, Adam, and Adam is now out of the traffic, he's in the booth. Thank you to Ben for holding down the fort. But Adam, do you know how many times $900,000 goes into $4 billion?
I don't know. I'm not much of a math guy.
Yeah, well, lucky for you.
It seems like a lot.
Yeah, lucky for you. I have a math degree, and I can tell you that $900,000 goes into $4 billion over 4,000 times. Not 4 times, not 40 times, not 400 times, 4,000 times.
That's a lot of times.
And that is, yes, exactly. That's a lot of times. And that $900,000 is for 1 year of labor, and that $4 billion is for 1 bonus, right? So, look. If I was in the ILA, I would be pushing for a reduction in the salary of the president, okay? And and if some ILA people see this, they're probably not going to be happy with me saying that, but that's okay. I'm used to some union people not being happy with the things that I say on here, okay? But that's fine. But I don't think it's I don't think he should be making almost $1 million a year. But again, like with the workers themselves, it is physically impossible. It's just physically not possible for me to be less interested in hearing criticism of a less than $1 million salary from people who defend billion-dollar bonuses, which is exactly what every single attack on this strike was. Whether they put it in those terms or not, that's what it was. If you were attacking the strike, you are defending billion-dollar bonuses, okay? And so if you're doing that, I'm just physically not possible for me to be interested in what you say about the president of the ILA salary. So, look, there you go. And also, I will say, as an outsider without a say in the salary of the ILA president, if anybody in the world can be said to, quote, earn $1 million salary and not quite $1 million, almost $1 million. If anybody in the world can be said to, quote, earn $1 million salary, I would say it's probably the democratically elected president of an organization of tens of thousands of workers, which has democratic and transparent budgets, which can be changed by the members should they desire. Okay? Right? So, you don't get a say over your boss's income. They just get to decide themselves how much they make. Okay? The members ultimately are responsible for the compensation of their leaders. And so if anybody can earn $1 million, I think it's people that are accountable to tens of thousands of people. That's my opinion. Now, like I said, there's also been a lot of talk about the income of the longshoremen themselves, saying that they make $100,000, $200,000, whatever. So they are selfish. They're taking the country hostage, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I'll emphasize it's the executives who make billions of dollars who are taking the country hostage because they have and have had the money to pay for 100% of the union's demands and then some, and not raise prices and still make profits. But unfortunately, and also I will say before I get one more thing, the fact that these overpaid executives were willing to take us into a strike to avoid giving the workers what they were asking for, the fact that they were willing to do that really should call into question the responsibility of these owners. Are they responsible enough? Are they good enough stewards of the global economy to be trusted with the ownership of these incredibly important institutions? Are they responsible enough for that? I think probably the answer is no. I don't think they're responsible enough for the ownership of these incredibly important to the global economy institutions. And so we should be talking about revoking their ownership. But that's going to be a conversation for another day, I think. But unfortunately, look, it's just not exactly true that the longshoremen are paid like kings. Their starting rate up and down the East Coast, so even in New Jersey and New York, remember, is $20 an hour. $20 an hour. You can make that like working at a fast food place in a lot of places. And, look, that's great. I think fast food workers should be paid $20, $25. I think they should have pay. I think they should have benefits. I think they should have retirement, all that good stuff. But just, look, it's not the same level of difficulty or danger, working in a fast food restaurant and working, on the docks, right? It's just not the same. And so that is their starting pay, $20 an hour. After 6 years of progression, they get to a top base wage of $39 an hour. $39 an hour is like basically what any journeyman tradesperson will make, right? I mean, that's not an uncommonly high base pay. That's only $81,000 a year for a normal year of work.
Right, I know plenty of trades folks who actually make more than that.
Yes, exactly. People in the stagehands union in Alabama, in Huntsville, it's the stagehands union. I love the stagehands. Many people say the stagehands are great. Many people say I love the stagehands more than anybody, actually. But the stagehands here in Huntsville, not a particularly strong union, as far as the leverage and the power that they exert and everything. Their riggers make more than $39 an hour here, right? I mean, they make like 44, 45. Isn't that right?
Something in that area, yeah. They do make more than that.
And now
that's base, of course.
It's base and the stagehands here, they don't have benefits, and so the longshoremen typically have benefits, and so it's not quite the same. But it's just to say $39 an hour, it's not outrageous. That's only 81.
For highly specialized, skilled labor.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is not that unusual.
Right.
I personally wouldn't be interested in working on the docks for $20 an hour.
Exactly.
And that's what I've told people recently. Like, I mean, if you want to trade places with them, by all means,
exactly,
put in your application, right?
Right. Yeah.
It seems like a pretty tough job, and I don't know if they can hold the entire economy hostage.
Seems like it's pretty important.
Seems like they're pretty important.
Yeah. Exactly. And so, look, to make that $200,000 number, which has been floating around because of a report on Longshore pay during 2020, right, when they probably worked more than any other time in the history of the union, a worker at top rate would have had to work nearly 80 hours a week every single week. Okay? So if you want to work 80 hours a week. They talked about, the leaders talked about some of them working 100 hours a week. If you want to go work 100 hours a week on the freaking docks, then go do it, and then you can make $200,000 a year. If you think that's so great, then just go do it. Go quit whatever fancy pants computer job you have and go work on the docks and make the money that you think is too much. Just go do that, right? It's also important to note how far the ILA has lagged behind their West Coast counterparts in the ILWU, the International Longshore Workers Union, out on the West Coast. This from Labor Notes in their article about the end of the strike. Quote, ILA members have lagged behind West Coast longshore workers in the ILWU whose starting pay, right? You go work day one, starting pay in their most recent contract is $40 an hour. The starting pay for West Coast longshore workers exceeds the top pay for East Coast longshore workers. Okay? East Coast workers started at $20 an hour, like I said, and rose to $39 an hour over 6 years. Additionally, you think union, you think kind of tradespeople, you think pensions. Union trades folks are the only folks in the country, basically, some of the only folks with pensions. But workers in Houston and Philadelphia have no pension at all, while many other East Coast workers have barely discernible ones because pensions in the ILA are apparently negotiated like local by local. Pensions on the West Coast are uniform across ports and higher overall. So in addition to making something like half of what West Coast longshore workers make, they also make nearly 12% less than they did 20 years ago when adjusted for inflation. So, if you're not kind of frustrated at everything that you've been hearing from the mainstream media about this, then, I don't know what's wrong with you. Like, there's something wrong with you, right? Another fairly constant theme, and we're about, we're coming to the end of this, breaking down the longshore strike, and then we're going to bring on a reporter from AL.com to talk about, the Alabama local in Mobile. But another fairly constant theme was the attempt to pit longshore workers against other workers. Here is how Daggett responded to an attempt at that from Fox News.
Over the weekend, the past
Secretary of Labor Julie Sue has been terrific. She's knocking down doors. She's trying to stop this. She's trying to get us to a media where we can have a fair negotiations. It's the companies that don't want to. They don't want to sit here and be fair. So that's why we're out here fighting for our livelihood.
What more from the automation do you want? What more protections could there be?
What more?
Yeah, they have language in there now.
Not strong enough, because what happens is they come in with new technology. We just caught them in Mobile, Alabama, called Autogate, and that means the trucks are coming in and they're already checked in somewhere else and not using the checkers in the ILA. Circumventing the contract. They don't care. They don't care. It's not fair. And if we don't put our foot down now, they would like to run over us, and we're not going to allow that.
You are going to grind the economy to a halt here on the East Coast and the Gulf Coast.
No, not us. They are. Don't spin it now because you're Fox News. They're going to drive it.
But are you worried?
They're going to drive it.
Are you worried that this strike...
They have the capital to settle this thing.
Are you worried that this strike is going to hurt the everyday American, the farmers that need to reach the export market? They're telling me that they're going to hurt through all of this.
Now you start to realize who the longshoremen are, right?
Nobody cares.
People never gave a about us until now, when they finally realized that the chain is being broke now. Cars won't come in. Food won't come in. Clothing won't come in. You know how many people depend on our jobs? Half the world. And it's time for them and time for Washington to put so much pressure on them to take care of us, because we took care of them. And we're here 135 years and brought them where they are today, and they don't want to share.
There you go. There you go. So, I think that's a really great way to respond to some of this stuff. Their labor is incredibly important for the entire global economy, and they should be compensated for that. And their compensation for that is also good for the rest of us. It brings wages higher in the general wage market, and it gives these people locally more money to spend in their communities, money that would otherwise be, let's remember, in the bank account of some overseas executive. And finally, there's been a lot of attacks on the union for their position on automation. But the position is not as clear as automation proponents would like you to believe. This is from Michael Sonato's report for the Real News Network. Quote, automation in the shipping industry has further threatened the economic benefits these ports yield. Despite capital costs associated with automation offsetting any savings from labor costs, and research showing automated ports are generally 7 to 15% less productive than non-automated ports. So, there's stuff showing different things. I don't want to say that that is necessarily the end-all be-all about the efficiency and the productivity of automated versus non-automated ports, but it's to say that it's not as clear as the automation proponents would like you to believe. And like the ILA was saying, machines, they don't feed families, right? They don't pay taxes. They don't do any of that kind of stuff. And so you really have to think about the human costs when you're talking about automation. And if you're going to be doing automation, you need to make sure that it actually benefits the workers that are there. I actually had the fortune of being on the picket line down in Tampa with these folks. I was there as the picket captain, got the call that the strike was over. So that was pretty cool. But, I was talking to some of them, and they were talking about how at Tampa, their local used to have almost 1,000 longshoremen working, and now they only have some 200, right? And so that's a lot fewer jobs. That's a lot less workers in the economy. And it's pretty clear that even the remaining longshoremen are not the ones that are reaping the benefits. It's the people that are getting billion-dollar bonuses, right? So there you go. That's the breakdown of the Longshore strike. Everything that you heard from right-wing mainstream media about the longshoremen are greedy. It's all BS, as you should know if you're a listener to this program. There you go. Hope you leave us a voicemail about it if you disagree, or you stay tuned for overtime and you join us on Zoom. So we've got Patrick Darrington in the Zoom, right?
We do, yes.
Fantastic. Patrick Darrington is a friend of the show, I guess we can say. He has been at the Alabama Political Reporter. Now he is at AL.com. He wrote a really good piece about the Longshore strike right after it kicked off. Titled, Alabama Longshoreman Says Striking Mobile Dock Workers Face Injury, Death. Quote, we've made an ultimate commitment. Patrick Darrington, AL.com reporter. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, as the strike started, I have not, I was able to talk to some of the folks in Tampa, but I haven't been able to talk to folks in Mobile, and you were able to talk to some of those folks. What was their, we'll go in two parts. Let's first start with, their reaction, like their justification for striking. Why did they say, just absent, we'll get to the reaction to the media and all these, talking points later, but why did they say that they were going on strike?
Right. And so I talked specifically to Mr. Bass, the local union president down there in Mobile, because, obviously the other workers weren't talking at the time. And, he just explained how, like the article said, they've made the ultimate sacrifice. Since COVID, the workers were out there allowing the economy to continue while they were on the docks catching COVID. Some were dying, as he explained to me. And as you said, during that time, the companies were, according to CNN, I saw a report, they were making like $400 billion from 2020 to 2023. Their profits, the top end profits were like $400 billion. So all of that's going on. Then you have automation that's creeping in, and there's arguments about whether automation can help or hurt, but at the same time, from the perspective of a worker in a company, for workers, they see automation as a thing that's going to take their jobs. And so, obviously you're going to be opposed to that. And that's what some of them explained to me off the record. And I think we're going to talk about that as well. But yeah, so, and I think we all have seen, like, for companies, whether it's a choice between workers and automation, well, who do you have to pay? Who do you have to give benefits to?
Right.
Real people or machines. So they're going to continue to automate to the extent that they can to maximize their own profits. So that's another issue. And yeah, just overall, the fact that if you look at the West Coast, like you said, recent negotiations, they had 40, they maxed out or they begun at $40. Meanwhile, for, those on the East Coast, their top pay is $39. And like you said, a lot of misinformation was going on about, claims that the top or the beginning pay for those on the East Coast is $39, which is not true. It's in the contract. You can go online to ILA union and you see the contract. You can look through all the details for the previous contract, and they start at $20. So yeah, those were the reasons that Bass was telling me. And I did talk to some workers off record, and they said pretty much the same thing as him. Some of them, I spoke to one guy, he's been there, I think he said 50 years. Yeah, he said he started, he was 16, he's 66. Yeah, 50 years. He said he's seen people, he's seen people that have been killed, injured on the job. He said it has improved, but he did say that, the workers still deserve better. And so, yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the Mobile local? How many members are there? And, did you get into like some of the specifics about like what they do on the job? Like, what does it look like to be a longshoreman? Were you able to talk to them about that?
Right. Yeah. Obviously there's different, so the numbers, so I didn't get there till the morning. They started the strike at 12:01. I didn't get there till like 8 a.m. At the time that I got there, there were, in the location I was at, they were striking across different locations across Mobile, like APM terminals, at the port and stuff like that. So I think the location I was at, there were about 50 or so people. I think when they first started, there were about 160 to 170. I think they were like doing shifts to, obviously have people that would come in during the morning or during the day or during the night to continue the strike effort. So you have different people coming in and out. And so I think overall the union has, I think conservatively, according to union facts, because there's a lot of nothing concrete, and I haven't got information from the union themselves, but I think about 338 according to union facts, and that's like 2022 data. So about 338 members down there in Mobile, like the local 1410. And yeah, so you have different people doing different jobs. You have people dealing with the freights. You have people doing automation, like in the I forget the name of the machine, doing stuff like that. You have people doing, on the ships doing that type of work. I'm blanking on some of the specifics that they told me because a lot of this is off record, like I said. But the danger, I think the thing that told me was the danger, though. You have things above you, you have cargo, you have things, you have cargo coming this way, you have wood flying towards you. Yeah, one of the workers he explained, imagine you have pieces of wood like that coming straight at your face. So it's like it's a constantly moving, dangerous job. The inclement weather that they have to deal with, everything of that. And so, yeah, they're all doing different things. And again, like you said about the makeup of these workers, I think from when I spoke to them, I spoke to the union, I don't want to say spokesperson, but a representative with the union. And she told me that they are majority Black down there in Mobile, for example. So, but while I was out there, there were like, white individuals as well, but majority Black. So, to the notion of, privileged workers and who does this dangerous work.
Yeah, I'm interested in how they how did the people respond that you were able to talk to? How did they respond to some of the things that were being said about them in the media? Right? Specifically, the Mobile Chamber of Commerce CEO Bradley Byrne, really disparaging the strike and the workers and all this kind of stuff. How did the workers respond to these kinds of things that were being said about them?
Right. And so, Bass, starting with Bass, he said that he told me and my coworker, John Shark, we were both interviewing him. He was like, he should just come. But for one, he said, I'm not a politician. This is what Bass was saying. He said that Byrne is a politician and they're pro-business. So they're always going to be doing things that are, business aligned. And then he said that he should come work a day in his shoes and see, how it actually is. And he explained, how, again, they made the ultimate sacrifice. Like, everybody loves watching Alabama football, Auburn football. A lot of dock workers, they don't get that privilege. They miss holidays, miss birthdays, miss everything like that. He also said that often, I think from Byrne and other people, you often hear Ivy, I'm pretty sure an example, you often hear about we have the fastest growing port in the nation. I want to say, forgive me, somebody fact check me. I don't know if they were saying nation, but they have the fastest growing port. And so Bass, he said, like, so, but who is responsible for making it the fastest growing port? So the workers. That's what he said. And so if you're going to say that, but he's never heard Byrne, compliment the workers. And so I did talk to some other people again off the record, and they were essentially saying, same things as Bash, like, come work in our shoes. And it's like, how are we selfish when, again, we've done all of this to allow the consumers to live their lives. And so now that they are at the table trying to get what they deserve and are able to get based on, the contract negotiations that gave them a 60% raise, like, they didn't really, obviously didn't agree with what they were hearing and seeing. And so,
Exactly. Yeah, that's always been my position. People that say that, it's like I'm thinking now about the coal miner strike, how there were some numbers going around about how some of the miners made $100,000 and so therefore they shouldn't be striking and all this kind of stuff. And I've always just thought, well, if you think that's too much money, like if it's really such a great deal that they're getting, then you should go and work. Work those 70 hours a week that it takes to get $100,000 a year. Work those 100 hours a week that it takes on the docks to make $200,000 a year. If it's such a great deal, if they're really making a killing, then you should just go do that instead of whatever the hell you're doing. So you have.
Sorry, I just want to jump in. Is it still accurate that wages have stagnated since the 70s? Is that still accurate?
I think that over the last few years, wages have outpaced inflation, but since the 70s, the broad trend is still general stagnation. Yeah.
Gotcha. While productivity has gone.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're producing. Yeah, well, and that's right. And when I was talking to the folks down in Tampa, they mentioned how, used to, like 30, 40 years ago, there were 1,000 people in that local doing work, and now there's only about 200. And they're obviously, they're pulling into the Port of Tampa multiples of how much goods they were shipping in 30, 40 years ago, when they had 3 or 4 times the members. They were doing 3 or 4 times less as far as production, as far as bringing stuff in and out. And so, yeah, they're way, way, way more productive. And then the longshoremen specifically, over the last 20 years, their pay has decreased in inflation-adjusted dollars by 11%, the longshoremen specifically. So, yeah, it's just, it's really frustrating. You had a couple of other pieces, though, that I want to get to really quickly. I'm not going to have just a whole lot of time, but let's start off with the stuff about Ainsworth. Ainsworth has been spreading a lot of this stuff. There's been a lot of different kind of rumors spread about Haitian workers and immigrants in various communities. And in Alabama, one of the claims has been that there is a soaring HIV rate in areas with high rates of Haitian immigration. And you and others at AL.com have looked into that. What's the veracity of this claim?
Obviously, it's false. And, we've asked Ainsworth to offer evidence of his claims, and we have yet to hear a response from him or his camp yet. So, yeah, I mean, he posted a letter sent to Secretary Mayorkas just about, the Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuelan parole program. And so, this has become a topic that has dominated, those in the right-wing sphere as they push this migrant issue. And so, he put that letter out. And so we looked into, the claims that he made just about HIV, because obviously there's a history associated with claiming that specifically those coming from, other countries are carrying diseases with them, and these like racist kind of attitudes that come along with that. And so we looked at the data. There was no indication that there was any increase from 2019 to now that was out of the ordinary. And there were a couple agencies that also spoke about how his comments were terrible. They also just made it worse for those who are dealing with HIV and the stigma around that. So, his comments were.
Yeah, so not true is the is the verdict here, and that's like just a kind of crazy thing to just say without evidence. Like, why would you? I don't understand. I don't understand the impulse to do that. But I'm not a politician. I guess maybe that's why I'm not a politician. I don't have the idea to just lie, to just make up stuff. Maybe that's why I'm not a politician. You've had some other reporting about Medicaid expansion. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so Thomasville Regional Medical Center closed like a few weeks ago, and so we got this email just about from the American Cancer Society Action Network, and I reached out to Jane Addams just to talk to her about what she's been seeing and what she thinks about the whole Medicaid situation and the rural hospital crisis that we're having in the state. And she just bluntly told me that Governor Ivey, she can sign Medicaid expansion into law with one stroke of her pen. She's out of the 10 states that are still left that haven't expanded Medicaid in the country. She's the only one that doesn't have to get legislative approval to do that. So when we hear these discussions about the legislature hasn't, passed Medicaid expansion, well, actually, Ivy could just, take executive action herself and just do that. And it's funny because, so I talked to Miss Adams first. And so she said in that, because I posed a question to her, that I assume that Ivy will say that, she's still worried about the long-term costs. And so that's where, for those who read the article, you see the quote where she's like, well, that's a lie. It's just an excuse, everything. And so I'd already contacted Ivy's campaign, and by the time that I got off the phone with Miss Adams, I got the response from Ivy's campaign about, saying exactly that she's still worried about the long-term costs. And so, to me, that's just a little interesting that sort of anticipated her response. But yeah, so that's what I did with that, just spoke to some advocates. Oh, Alabama Rise as well. Shout out to Adam. They also had a few statements about the issue facing Alabama rural hospitals as well, and calling on Ivy to sign Medicaid expansion into law. And so we've also seen Caroline Dobson, she's running Congressional District 2, and Republicans, well, I don't want to say some, at least the Speaker of the House, they've indicated that they are open to a public-private partnership to expand Medicaid. And so I think as this crisis continues, there's going to be some more less partisan politics being played, and not going along with the same line of like just being opposed to Medicaid. There seems to be a different attitude around the expansion. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops, especially going into the legislative session.
Patrick Darrington, reporter for AL.com. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this morning.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we're going to go to a break. We're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about the District 1 runoff election in Huntsville City, where a union member, the first black woman, was elected to the Huntsville City Council. Stay tuned, folks.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Back from the traffic. Appreciate him joining us today. So, folks, like I said before we left for the break, Huntsville's District 1 elected a union member to the city council, the first black woman to ever be on Huntsville's city council, Michelle Watkins, a member of the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, Local 1858. Really exciting. The North Alabama Area Labor Council endorsed her, as did the Communication Workers of America, CWA, Local 3905. And AFGE Local 1858 endorsed her, as did the AFGE's 5th District and National. So really exciting for her to win there, and looking forward to seeing what she does in the seat. She is the board member for that district. She has been the board member for that district for the past 8 years. So she has strong roots in the community. She's lived in the community in District 1 all her life. I believe she's an alumni of Alabama A&M. Isn't that right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think that's right. And as a board member, she worked very closely with Adam while Adam was a teacher and worked for the Alabama Education Association. So, Adam, I know that you've got a lot of thoughts about Michelle winning. So yeah, take it away.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give some thoughts here and let you jump back in here in a second. But I worked with Miss Watkins pretty closely for a few years. I represented about 1,500 Huntsville City Schools employees from 2015 to 2020. And, Michelle was elected in the fall of 2016. That was a really big deal when she was elected. She was challenging the school board president incumbent, Lori McCauley. At the time, crooked Casey Wardynski was the superintendent, and it was, probably the source of controversy in the board election. It was kind of a referendum on Wardynski and his leadership and the direction of the school system under that leadership. So in August 2016, she won, and she won pretty big, if I remember right. And it was really, an example of grassroots versus the establishment. The big money in town had really supported her opponent. They were determined to keep her out of that seat, but she was able to win, and she had a lot of backing from educators and just from, folks in the community. Like you said, Jacob, she's been in D1 her whole life. So, when she won, she was elected at the same time as Pam Hill, who was a retired educator who won in District 5. And those two wins on the school board really was kind of the, final straw for Casey Wardynski. He ended up resigning a few weeks later. Of course, amid controversy, he turns out he had a secret relationship with a contractor that the school business was doing business with, and that was coming to light, and he surely didn't want to be around when those two strong women were on the school board asking questions about it. So he dipped out of town. So I worked with Miss Watkins, in the years since then, and something I can say is that I always felt like we could have a good working relationship, even when we didn't agree, right? We didn't always agree. She was on the school board. I was representing the employees of the school board. Not always going to see eye to eye, but we were all able to always have, direct communication, honest communication, keep it real with each other. and keep it moving for the best interest of everybody involved. And I was always impressed that she was willing to ask uncomfortable questions and tough questions that needed to be asked. And she, never shied from that, and, faced a lot of opposition from the big money interest in town, the elites who run Huntsville. There are special interests, there are local elites, and they dominate local politics. The property developers, the CEOs, and of course the lawyers and accountants and such who work for those people. So she is always someone that I have been impressed with, being willing to stand up to, those forces and speak up for the people. So, I really appreciate that. And, I was impressed that she was willing to engage with the North Alabama Area Labor Council. Our council did a questionnaire, a pretty detailed questionnaire, and we also did interviews. Ms. Watkins was willing to do both. To his credit, her opponent, Devin Keith, also engaged. So I do want to acknowledge that, and I do appreciate that he did so. I think the council just felt once we got to that runoff election that there was just a clear choice and a clear opportunity to make a difference. And I hope that the council did. I do believe there were quite a few union members in that district. If I remember right, over 1,000 union members in the area, or union households at least.
Yeah, 1,000 union members, some 2,500 members of union households.
Right, so it's a very working class district. North Huntsville is, District 1 is North Huntsville, predominantly black area of town, very working class area of town, close to Alabama A&M University. Mae Jemison High School is the high school for the district. Miss Watkins was a teacher at J.O. Johnson, which was the previous school there. So, came up through the ranks, proud to see a union sister winning elected office. I am excited about, dialogue and just having open dialogue with the council person. I think is going to be really important for the Labor Council, for our unions in the area, as we try to advocate for more worker-friendly policies, right? Working folks often don't get much influence in local politics. But local politics is very close to us. It's something we interact with every day, and we deal with the consequences of it every day. And it's really important that union folks, that working folks get active and get engaged with local policy and local, policy makers. So I'm excited that, I at the very least, I know Michelle Watkins will engage in dialogue with us. She will hear us out. And, I can't say that for everyone on the Huntsville City Council. I can't say that for everyone, in every city council and school board in the area. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the school board race in District 1. The Labor Council did endorse Patricia King, also an AFGE member. Unfortunately, she came up about 150 votes short in that runoff election. I also had worked with Ms. King closely through my education career. She was a reliable activist. I could count on her to, attend a school board meeting or a budget hearing, count on her to offer some citizen comments, ask some questions, stand up for the community. Ms. Chandra Jones ended up winning that school board seat. I was disappointed that Ms. Jones did not engage with the Labor Council. She did not respond to our questionnaires or interview requests. I do know plenty of educators who supported her campaign, and so I hope that those educators will have influence. And I am concerned that the special interests spent a lot of money on that election. I know the Committee of 100, it's my understanding they spent $20,000, if not more, to win that election. So that's concerning as someone who, really fought against corporate education reform and privatization and dealt with the consequences of corporate influence in our local school systems. I don't think that those rich elites spend that kind of money for no reason. I think they want something in return. So that's a big concern. But as I said, I know plenty of educators who I really like and trust and respect who did back that candidate. And, I hope that they will have her ear and not just folks like the Committee of 100 and other special interests. It's interesting days ahead. I'm very curious to know how the dynamics will change on the city council with Ms. Watkins on there. It should be interesting. I know there's been tension in the past between her and Mayor Tommy Battle. They have not always seen eye to eye. So that will be a fun thing to watch for sure. But I'm really, really excited about just knowing that we have someone who came from a working class background in that position. And hopefully that means more working folks can have more influence.
Yep. That's going to be it for us on the first half of the program. Folks, make sure you find us online, Facebook, YouTube, The Valley Labor Report. We're going to be talking to Chris Townsend about Jack Welch and how he is, in many ways, responsible for what's going on at Boeing with the strike of 30,000 machinists up in the Pacific Northwest. It's going to be a really good conversation. We're also going to be taking calls. We dropped the Zoom link in the YouTube chat, so if you want to jump on and give us a call, you can do that there. Adam, really quick, 1 or 2 plugs, and we'll roll out.
Don't forget Labor Notes Alabama Troublemakers School, Saturday, October 19th in Birmingham. Go to labornotes.org/events and you can find that. We want to see you at the Alabama Troublemakers School. Don't miss it.
All right, folks. With that, if you don't follow us online, then we will see you next week. Okay, folks. All right. Appreciate you staying tuned. That's the end of the first half of the program. Like I said, we got a great second half of the program lined up for you. We dropped the Zoom and the YouTube chat, so if you want to give us a call, that's going to be the way to do it this week. Find us on YouTube and go there, get the Zoom link, and jump in. We'll take calls one at a time. I was going to be talking to Chris Townsend about Jack Welch. Lots of good stuff. Stay tuned.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
Folks, welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Folks, if you're listening to us as a podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever, you should give us a 5-star rating. Give us a 5-star rating. We are, I think, the number 1 or number 2 Alabama news type podcast on Spotify, which is kind of crazy to be beating, places like 1819 News and AL.com, which both have like millions of dollars behind them and not having millions of dollars behind us. But that is the case. Believe that is true. Number 1 or number 2 on Spotify.
I want to believe.
Yeah, I mean,
I want to believe. I'd like to believe that.
It is undeniably true that I don't know how one would determine the number 1. Like I don't know how many listeners these podcasts get, but we do have more and better ratings than all of the Alabama news and podcast type things on Spotify. However, we are behind the libs on Apple, folks. The libs are beating us on Apple.
Cannot have that. Please
can't have that.
Out.
No,
please do.
No. So if you listen to us,
we also have the best audience. So
we do.
We have
That's
the
right.
best fans and listeners of any of these programs. I'd put y'all up against anybody.
Exactly. Yeah. So especially if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, even if you don't listen to us on Apple Podcasts, you should go create an Apple Podcast account and then give us a 5-star rating, and then go back to listening to us on your platform of choice. I don't care how you do it. Just give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts particular, but anywhere. We got a great second half of the program for you. We're going to be talking about Jack Welch with Chris Townsend. Jack Welch was the CEO of GE for a long time. Really destroyed the company, destroyed American capitalism, almost single-handedly, if a person could be said to do such a thing. I know that obviously there's a lot of material conditions and forces and blah, 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 blah. Would have happened anyway. But Jack Welch was the one that did it. So...
Not a good guy.
Not a good guy. And one of his proteges took over Boeing and ran it into the ground, and that is the source of a lot of the strife of that caused the strike this year. 30,000 workers at Boeing still on strike in the Pacific Northwest. We're about almost a month in.
Yeah.
It's a pretty long strike.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
you know who is a good guy, though? That's Chris Townsend.
Chris Townsend, he is a good guy. Yeah, for sure.
Really glad to have him on.
Really excited to have that conversation. Don't think we have anybody else in the Zoom, anybody else from the listeners we're wanting to call in. So we did have another segment. Adam, you live in Athens, Alabama, and so you read some of the local news there. And there was an article that came out in the local news that you were really excited about. You're a big Five Guys fan, and this article really spoke to you from that place, right?
Sure, yeah. So I occasionally try to keep my eye on local news. Athens is a small town about 35-40 minutes west of Huntsville, for those of you not local. It's a very fast-growing city. Much of its overflow growth from Huntsville. But growing rapidly. Limestone County is the fastest-growing county in the state. So, anyway, I'm trying to keep my eye on the local news as well as Huntsville, since that's kind of the big metro in the area. But I saw something in the Athens News Courier, the local paper, that was really interesting to me, a fascinating article. It says, back on track, Athens weighs in on state workforce development. So it opens by saying Alabama ranks head and shoulders above several other states in workforce development and property tax stability. And the results are evident in Athens, according to both a city official and the Alabama Industrial Development Training. As new businesses and restaurants prepare to make way in the city's limits, such as Texas Roadhouse and Five Guys, Athens Mayor Ronnie Marks has seen the growth of Alabama's economic development firsthand. All right. So I think that's interesting that your example of economic development are two chain restaurants. Texas Roadhouse, Five Guys. It continues, it takes years to turn something like this around and become a place where businesses want to be. Athens Mayor Ronnie Marks told the News Courier, AIDT and others have done a tremendous job in getting us back on track as a state. Now that's interesting, because I've heard a lot of politicians over the last couple of years make a lot of noise about Alabama's workforce participation rate. So if our workforce development is so freaking great, why is our workforce participation rate 6 percentage points behind the national average? Right? Why is Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth and all these people talking about it all the time? That people need to go to work, right? Governor Kay Ivey famously said people need to get off their fannies and go to work in response to Alabama's low workforce participation rate. But here they are in this local paper bragging that our workforce development, top notch. Well, you know, makes me wonder, maybe there's more to workforce participation than simple development and retraining, right? Maybe there are real reasons and barriers preventing people from fully participating in the workforce. And it's not just that they need some, retraining class. Maybe it's a little deeper. So, we've got the beautiful, wonderful, amazing economic development happening as evidenced by 2 chain restaurants, which, by the way, the article does not tell you, you've got to find this elsewhere, that the city of Athens paid over $1 million for these 2 chain restaurants. Now, in fairness, there are 2 little chains connected to those 2 bigger chains. So it's 4 chain restaurants that they paid over $1 million for. That's going to take several years to recoup, according to their own estimates, if everything goes well, right? Now, I'm not sure if there's any strings attached to these subsidies. No mention of that. We're not really sure, but it's going to take at least 5 to 6 years for one of these deals to pay off. Another 2 to 3 years for the other deal to pay off. And like I said, a total of over $1 million. $900,000 for one development, $180,000 for another development. Right? And the city council agreed to these incentives where it pays back to the developer 100% of city sales tax until this total is reached, or for 5 years, whichever happens first. So the city pays over $1 million for 2 chain restaurants, calls it economic development, and our workforce development is supposed to be top notch, even though it's not reflected in workforce participation. And then they continue to say that according to area development rankings from areadevelopment.com, Alabama ranked number 1 in the nation for its low property tax rates, making way for businesses looking to expand to the state. And Mayor Marks said that's certainly a great recognition to have accomplished. It speaks to all the great economic development projects from Montgomery, along with the governor and her supportive staff, which have made Alabama an extremely competitive business environment. The rising tide floats all ships. So when the state gets better, all of us here get better as well. Now that's interesting. So number 1 in the nation for low property tax rates. And that's supposed to be a great recognition. Now, last I checked, correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob, do we rank number 1 in quality of life?
No. Nope.
Do we rank number 1 in infant mortality?
No. Well, I mean, what do you mean? Do we have the most babies die? Probably.
Okay, then yes. All right, fair enough. Yeah.
It's not good. Not good to be number 1 in infant mortality.
Right,
actually.
right. Yeah, last I checked, on virtually every statistic measuring quality of life, Alabama ranks at or near the bottom.
Right.
Right. We are one of the worst places to live in the entire developed world if you are an average working person. I know that may be a little controversial to say, but if you think about it, think about the full spectrum of a person, the public services we rely on, our health, our infrastructure, our economy, our wages, our poverty, right? It's all there. Alabama ain't doing so great when it comes to everyday people, right? So maybe there's a correlation between having the lowest property tax rates and the fact that we have some of the worst public services in the entire country. Sometimes you get what you pay for. Governor Ivey stated in this article, "We are committed to creating a business-friendly environment that supports growth and innovation." Alabama's strong commitment to workforce development and favorable tax policies positions us as a prime destination for businesses seeking to thrive, said AIDT. So that's really interesting. Love it when the local media does puff pieces for the politicians and misleads the public.
Right.
Because they did mention that this supposedly outstanding workforce development is not translating into outstanding workforce participation. It is not translating into outstanding wages or benefits or health outcomes. It's not translating. So, yeah, I was not a big fan. Can't say I approve. I did reach out to the mayor and to my city councilman just to chat. Would you believe they have not responded to me?
Wow.
I got a special, like, my gears really are grinding when public officials do not respond to their constituents.
Especially when it's like city councilors. Like, of any,
if President Biden can't answer my call,
exactly.
I can kind of understand.
Yeah.
He might be busy. Now, he personally may actually not be that busy. I don't know. Not anymore.
Right.
But, in general, the lower the office, the more responsive I expect you to be.
Exactly.
You ain't representing that many people.
Yeah. And then of the people that you represent, significantly fewer of them know that you are their city councilor and would be reaching out to you than know who the president is, right? So, like, the amount, so if you're a city council person, county commissioner, school board member,
you should respond to your constituents.
Every single message that you get from your constituent, unless it's just like a completely belligerent kind of, harassment type of stuff. You should be responding to everything. And my assumption is not that you were belligerent.
I was not. It was a very politely worded email. So was my follow-up email. Also, still polite.
Yeah.
I'll maintain that. But yeah, that's a very frustrating thing. I don't like when local media gives cover to this kind of crap. I don't like when politicians, spend our tax dollars to bring in a chain restaurant and call that economic development. Oh, wow. Tens of jobs.
Right.
Tens of jobs.
Tens of
minimum
the worst
wage
jobs tens of the worst jobs that you could possibly bring. Like, what job is going to pay people less than a restaurant
server
job
and a busboy? Right, yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I can't even think of a job that would have fewer benefits and lower wages that you would try to bring than a restaurant. I mean, that's
right. And I'm all for
absurd.
new restaurants in town. Don't get me wrong. Like, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's quality of life improvement. You could sell that better than economic development.
Right. Yeah. And in the other article I found from Quad Cities Daily that actually did spell out those incentives, the city was bragging that they also supported some local restaurants. And I thought, okay, well, that's good, because that was also one of my concerns. Like, what about the local folks? Like, people who are going to keep that money in the community? Whatever you want to say about small business owners, blah, blah, blah. At a certain level, I would rather the owner live in town, right, and spend their money in town. So I thought that could be something promising. Well, what they were bragging about was grants from Athens Main Street, the, like city adjacent nonprofit or whatever, that were a fraction of the incentives they gave to the chains. They gave a $20,000 grant to Rose Grill there to expand outdoor dining, which, fine. But it's just really interesting to me that, developers bringing in chain restaurants are getting these massive incentives. Are there strings attached? Are we looking at the impact of the environment? Are we looking at the impact on the economy? What about all these folks who are paid less than living wages? Are they going to qualify for food stamps? Are they going to get other public services? Are we actually, in effect, subsidizing these businesses twice, both in their low wages and in the very construction and operation of them? I don't know. Maybe there's just other ways to do economy.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah, well, and final thought on this, your city councilman, he might end up regretting snubbing the political committee chair of the North Alabama Labor Council.
He just might.
He just might. Have we got Chris Townsend in the Zoom?
Chris is coming in on the Zoom right now.
Fantastic. Chris Townsend, let's start with this. So 30,000 machinists at Boeing in the Pacific Northwest are on strike right now. Just a very quick recap of the conditions of the strike. It was something like the union secured a tentative agreement that raised wages by something like 30% over 3 or 4 years, but took away annual bonuses such that ultimately the raises were not really that much over the term of the contract. Also did not address some longstanding issues, did not reintroduce the pension, which is something that a lot of the workers have been asking for. And so it was, there were a lot of other issues, but super high level. The big ticket was supposedly the wage increases, and that ultimately did not amount to much. Ultimately, once you realized the fact that they took away the bonuses with it, the raises were something like 6 to 18% maybe over 3 or 4 years, not adjusted for inflation. So ultimately, when you adjust for inflation, it's like not a raise at all. And so people were pretty pissed about it, and they voted on the tentative agreement. And the machinists, when they do their ballots on these tentative agreements, they have a kind of weird voting system. You get a ballot with 2 questions. The first question is, do you accept the contract? The second question is, if a majority of people do not accept the contract, do you vote to authorize a strike? And to strike, you have to have at least 2/3 of the membership vote to authorize the strike, which is a lot, and really probably not a good way to do that, because then you could have a situation where like 60% of the people vote down a contract, but then it ends up getting implemented because not enough people vote for the strike. It's not great. But nevertheless, that did not happen. That did not happen even a little bit. It was something like 94% of people voted down the contract, and then 97% of people voted to authorize a strike if a majority did not accept the contract. So they overwhelmingly voted to strike. And so they did. They struck. 30,000 of them are on strike right now, have been for about 22 days, something almost a month, getting close to a month. And since then, Boeing has increased the offer by a little bit, reinstated the bonuses, but it is still not enough. Like the negotiating committee, which recommended the initial contract that was so overwhelmingly voted down, did not even put the new offer up to a vote of the membership, because what they were hearing back was just we're going to vote this down again. Don't make us go through this whole rigmarole over something that we're going to vote down. And so they didn't even put it up to a vote. Still negotiating. Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services, FMCS, has been engaged. They're in mediation right now, and negotiations have been ongoing. The union is putting out updates every day. And so that's really where we're at right now with the strike. Not a whole lot of updates since then, since Boeing pulled their support, or since Boeing pulled their stunt about the new contract offer. They didn't put the new contract offer after the one that was voted down. They didn't put it through the negotiating committee. They put it out in the press. And so that actually, in addition to the offer itself not being like materially enough, the perceived slight of the collective bargaining procedures also really inflamed the union and the members and everything like that. Another update that I saw last week that was really, really cool, we talked to the engineers union a couple of weeks ago about how they were supporting the strike, how they're instructing their members to not do machinist work, how they refused Boeing's request to lay people off in spite of their layoff protections in the contract, which was a very funny request for Boeing to make, but the engineers union did not accept it, and so they're still working, which is actually putting giving additional leverage to the machinists as they go on strike, because it's putting an increased financial burden on the company. And the engineers union, Adam, get this, has committed to donating, the local union has committed to donating $99,000 over the next 3 months to their strike fund. That's big. Yeah, it's like $12,500 or something every 2 weeks for the next 3 months. And so, yeah, I mean, a really, really big donation from a local union. So I want to give them kudos. Really exciting stuff. But so that's really all the updates there are for the strike. Not much to say on it. So I wanted to kind of take a step back and talk about the context for this, right? Because this is happening in a context of the American capitalist system that has continued to degrade the American worker over the last, 50 years. And a lot of it can be traced back to Reagan and Jack Welch. Jack Welch was the CEO of GE that really started this, because before Jack Welch at GE, there was some amount of cooperation between labor and management as far as, like I told the communications person of the engineers union, it's not like corporations have ever actually cared about their workers, but they felt like the way that they could make the way that they could best perform as a company would be to kind of placate their employees, to kind of give them relatively, okay wages, to give them benefits, give them a pension, things like this. If you do that, the workers will reward you and have high productivity and things like that. And Jack Welch totally turned that on its head. And his management style has proliferated throughout the American economy. And one of Jack Welch's proteges led Boeing. And it is that management style that has completely destroyed the company of Boeing from a company that pilots said, if it ain't Boeing, I ain't going, to now basically everybody being scared to ride in a Boeing airplane because of all of the manufacturing issues, because of the low quality of the aircraft that they're putting out. So it's really destroyed the public reputation of this company alongside the working conditions of the people there. So I wanted to give you this background, and we're going to dive deep into this with Chris Townsend. Chris Townsend is a retired organizing director from the Amalgamated Transit Union, but more relevantly, he worked for UE for 25 years. For all of that time, he was heavily involved with the UE's, the United Electrical Workers, General Electric, GE's bargaining strategy and organizing. When he became the political director in 1992, he was appointed to the UE-GE National Bargaining Committee, and he remained there until he retired in 2013. He participated in 7 rounds of bargaining with this company that Jack Welch led, and was part of leading the 11 union coalition of coordinated bargaining between all of the unions that represented workers at GE and GE. He was actually in charge of the bargaining for the last 6 years that he was there. In that role, he dealt with David Calhoun multiple times, both in the transportation division and in New York at national negotiations. Calhoun is the guy who left GE for Boeing and has done so much damage. So he has really had a front row seat to the context of this. He's the perfect guy to talk to, so really excited to talk to Chris Townsend. Chris Townsend, welcome back to the show.
Boy, you think I would understand how to work these things after all this. Thanks, Jacob, and thanks, Adam. My favorite labor show, Valley Labor Show Report.
I appreciate it. The vote of confidence from you really does mean a lot, especially with your extensive, experience in the labor movement. Really appreciate the work that you've done to support us and to support, generally the working class. And so, about this Jack Welch and what's going on here at Boeing, I guess to set the scene, to go even further back before Jack Welch, can you talk to us about GE before Jack Welch?
Yeah, GE, General Electric, or as we would derisively refer to them, Generous Electric, which is what they would have you believe. I dealt with the company for 25 years. UE was the first union to have any success organizing GE, starting in the 30s and all the way up until a few years ago, when the last fragment was sold off, UE dealt with, or the last fragment representing UE members was sold off. So GE is certainly a company that is studied for many different reasons. I would say that our labor movement has not taken nearly enough time to consider the legacy of General Electric. General Electric was a historically anti-union through and through corporation. It was the early electrical equipment combine, started in part in upstate New York and Schenectady, New York, with Thomas Edison, going back all the way to the real beginning of mass production in that industry. And the company grew and grew and grew, and eventually was organized in the Depression. Folks who want to believe and repeat the nonsense that Joe Biden is somehow the most pro-union president in U.S. history should consider the role of President Roosevelt during that key era when the mass production unions were organized. And in the case of GE, it was a head-on collision between the legitimate new unions like UE that were emerging and old established company unions, where the company had everybody right in their grip, and that had to be broken. So the company waged, it was a very ideological company. General Electric was very aware of the ideology of capitalism and profiteering and whatnot. It oozed every dealings you would have with them. You would be reminded of this. And there had been a number of sort of older standard General Electric. It was a large enough company that it had its own internal culture over many decades. And there was an old guy, Reggie Jones, who was sort of, he had delivered tremendous profits to the investors. After all, that was his main job. But he did not seek the limelight, did not get up in the morning with any additional pep in his step. And he developed the young Jack Welch to come in and take over, I believe it was 1981. And whatever one would think or say about Jack Welch, he came with a buzzsaw from day one. He saw the company as something that he could disassemble, break up, squeeze and wring out, and then transition to his vision for what the company would be. And what happened in those years, he got the nickname Neutron Jack. Anybody that ever dealt with GE would remember this. Why did he get the nickname Neutron Jack? This was because Ronald Reagan, and let's remember Ronald Reagan had been an employee of General Electric in the publicity department in the 50s and 60s. They were in large measure responsible for creating Ronald Reagan. Let's not forget that. But Welch took on that Neutron Jack moniker because Reagan had put together what was known as the neutron bomb. This was the atomic bomb that would explode, and it would not kill people so much with the explosion. It would kill people with neutron particles, highly charged neutron particles, and it would kill people without as much destruction to the property. So this is exactly what Welch went to work to do. He had a mantra that he used: fix, close, or sell. In other words, attacking the very core of the company, abandoning any desire to continue to stick with those products that people, had seen them make probably trillions of dollars in profits over the decades, which was lighting and electrical manufacturing, products of all manner, related to the electrical industry. So Welch embraced on this very brazen anti-worker, anti-community type program, super profits being his goal. And I know in our dealings with GE through UE, the United Electrical Workers, one of the many abominations that the company gave us was the pollution of the Hudson River with PCBs. They also polluted a number of other rivers, I believe the Connecticut River from the Pittsfield plant and whatnot. Now, this was PCBs are deadly. Jack Welch used to refer to them as something you could put on your breakfast cereal, not to be worried about them. Well, everyone was worried about them, and they were forced to clean them up. But during that battle that UE had, UE represented the plant in Hudson Falls in Fort Edward, New York, that had actually been the source of the pollution. It was stated to UE forthright, right up front, that GE's goal, if they had if they had a magic wand, they would put all of their manufacturing plants on a barge, and they would push that barge around from port to port to port all over Earth, always seeking the lowest price for labor to work in their mills. Now, whatever you can say about GE, they didn't mince any words. They told you straight up, we're not interested in staying here in the United States. And Jack Welch, under his reign, which lasted up until I think around 2000, 2001, he followed through on his beliefs, which was he closed hundreds of plants in the United States. More than 100,000 workers were let go. And that's what people remember seeing, that carnage that went on out there. But one of the things I wanted to remind folks of is that there was much more to it than that, and there was much more residual toxic legacy from that. What Welch really set out to do, and what he did accomplish, was in his head-on assault on his own employees, and just smashing up what had been very profitable businesses. He transitioned the company into something that we had not seen in the United States. He essentially transformed General Electric into a bank. That by the time he retired, the bank was essentially being supported and capitalized by the remaining manufacturing parts of the company. So think of this. It's a manufacturing company. This wild man gains control, begins to absolutely just devour and smash up the productive part of the plant, sending those plants all over the world, following through on his adage about the barge, always bringing back the products to sell them here primarily. And then he also took that capital, rather than reinvesting it in manufacturing, he took that and put it into every imaginable type of financial instrument, banking, finance. They used to call it GE finance, and put it into real estate, and put it into, speculation of all sizes and shapes. And this is ultimately what destroyed the company. When the 2008-2009 blow up happened, the people may not remember this. GE was considered a too big to fail bank. And one of the things I'll say, Jacob, through any discussion of GE, every single solitary destructive move, illegal move, unethical move that General Electric Company made during that period was not only known to the federal government and known to the politicians, it was sanctioned, and in many cases it was applauded. Because, of course, this was magic. All the big investors who had put their money in were reaping enormous, enormous profits from this process. But it's a process that you can only go through once. And, when this discussion came up about the relationship of Jack Welch's legacy to Boeing, you had already mentioned, Jacob, that David Calhoun played a key role in Boeing. Let's visit David Calhoun for a little bit. Came up in GE, was one of the most loyal lieutenants of Jack Welch. He was a rising star in the company. He was viewed as somebody that someday might actually replace him. And he migrated through General Electric, taking in all their ideology, all their practices, all their beliefs, and all their, knowledge about how to do this when you take over a company. He transitioned first to the Nielsen company. Nielsen, as in the folks who do the TV ratings, they do a lot of other. And that's because GE had gotten into broadcasting through RCA's acquisition and NBC and whatnot. So anyway, Calhoun went off in that direction, but he quickly, that period of his career overlapped with his joining the Blackstone Group, the private equity group. And that begins really the connective tissue to the Boeing discussion, because that's where Calhoun became the particularly rancid and toxic combination of not only a Jack Welch devotee in terms of his absolute hatred of the workforce here in the United States and his desire to get rid of it as quickly as possible by any means necessary, and then at the same time massage the company into some sort of a financial instrument. GE went down the road of a bank. Calhoun was trained in terms of the private equity model, which in some ways is even more destructive. And, the rest is history. Now, I wanted to just get on the record for listeners. Calhoun has departed Boeing under a huge cloud. Perhaps we'll get into it, some of what was there. But the chief financial officer of Boeing today, Brian West, is also likewise another devotee that came from General Electric. Now, he doesn't have the name recognition and you don't hear about him very much, but let's get it on the record that the GE germ, destructive germ, is still alive and well in Boeing, despite the exit, or in spite of the exit of David Calhoun. So,
right. And, while we're still, and we'll get into that, and while we're still talking about Jack Welch, it's worth underlining that my understanding is that these cuts that Jack Welch made, you mentioned that his motto was cut, fix, or sell off, or something like that, right? Cut, fix, or close. And so what that means is that basically, not if a division of GE is unprofitable, we'll do one of these things. It's if it's not profitable enough, right? Because virtually all of the things that were ultimately cut or closed or quote unquote fixed from GE, they were all profitable. GE, before Jack Welch, was an incredibly profitable company, and they were able to do that while taking care of their workforce, to the extent that a corporation did and were forced to, by the union and kind of the material conditions of the time. But, they had pensions, they had health care, and all of these things since then, as they cut divisions, as they closed divisions and sold off manufacturing facilities, the ones that they had left, they have continued to chip away at everything that the workers won back then. But there was never a question until recently, ironically enough, about the profitability of GE, right?
Well, it was more a question, Jacob, of the sustainability of GE. In other words, as these processes took their course, the profits were phenomenal. GE was the darling of Wall Street. It was the darling of all the politicians. Both parties, Democrats and Republicans, would literally stampede to his feet to lick his boots, metaphorically. But they were supported by GE financially. And this ideology of this new, vibrant, thriving capitalist U.S.-based company, I mean, this was like an intoxicant to these folks. And those of us that were out in the field dealing with the workers in the company and following and tracking the company, we saw a completely different picture. But of course, Republicans and Democrats don't customarily talk to labor union folks about what's really going on. And we also had a problem, which I think is likewise in a different, somewhat different form with Boeing, is that the company had reached an immune status. General Electric, when the history is truly written, GE was immune to regulation. It was immune to the laws of the land. It was incredibly corrupt. Criminality pervaded the company at all levels, but it was never seriously recognized because, of course, it was what the management used to refer to as it was a money machine. Nobody wants to interrupt the money machine. And in terms of the role of the unions, you know, the 1969 national strike against GE, the multi-union strike against GE, chastened the company somewhat. It actually probably played a role in the evolution of their thinking. And it was, they were defeated. The General Electric Company was soundly and roundly defeated in the 1969 strike. All of the different things that the company had hoped to achieve by forcing that multi-union strike. It was over 150,000 workers in the United States and Canada that struck during that strike. And again, it was a bitter pill for the company to swallow. But coming out of that, what they pretty much decided to do was, rather than have, you know, all-out war with the unions, they were going to shift investment priorities and whatnot, and essentially exit the union industries. But that quickly became exiting manufacturing generally, because let's recall, by the time I came along in the 1980s, the bulk of the company was already unorganized. GE, there's no more fanatic anti-union company than General Electric. To the extent they maintained within their corporate structure an entire union avoidance department. It was a very perverse thing. They had an entire office in their headquarters known as Union Relations, with staff and resources to deal with the unions that they had to deal with, including UE. And then they had the Union Avoidance Office. And we witnessed over those several decades, the size of the Union Avoidance Office grew not only in size, but it became the primary determiner of labor relations as opposed to union relation. As the mindset changed, a mindset from tolerating the union at best to now actively liquidating the union. But it wasn't just a liquidation of the union. I think with you all in the U.S. South, there's hundreds of plants and GE facilities that were shuttered and closed in the U.S. South, and the bulk of them were unorganized. They were never unionized. So it really became a wagon rolling downhill, gaining momentum that was throwing off profits of a record basis. Nobody, and I want to make this clear, nobody in our federal government, nobody in the White House, both parties, Republicans and Democrats, nobody in our Securities and Exchange Commission, our Department of Justice, our Federal Trade Commission, nobody wanted to say, whoa, we better examine this. And I'll elaborate a little bit. Part of Jack Welch's magic, you'll see business writers talk about Six Sigma and motivation, and let's deal with quality issues. And he was a genius because he got involved in finance and all this. Well, let's get it on the record. The basic success of GE was forged out of their desire to, first of all, be a monopoly player, the dominant monopoly-sized player in any industry that they were in. They didn't like competition. They would either drive it out or buy it up or exit that business if they actually had competition. They engaged may even do this today. I don't know. I don't follow the company, that closely today, but Jack Welch was known for what was referred to as managing earnings. What is managing earnings? Well, for listeners, it's called cooking the books. It's called determining in advance what your profit figures and your balance sheet is going to be, and then massaging and managing the numbers to reach that. The company was engaged in unbelievable antitrust collusion, which we were aware of in UE and different business groups. They were a criminal recidivist in that regard. In the 1960s, they were prosecuted successfully in what was known as the electrical equipment cases for rigging the prices with their competition of all the electrical gear that power plants and power companies purchased. So the company really had a reputation, if you really were honest about it, was sordid. But yet there was this blinders. The folks were just mesmerized with the profitability and with the the PR that would be generated and all this. And so it was, I mentioned that because we watched the company literally being hollowed out, prepared for its ultimate collapse. But yet, rather than opposing it, other than UE, a few of the other unions, not even all of the unions, but a few of the unions and a few brave business writers and spokespersons, no one opposed this. No one even wanted to point this out. And the damage was done, and the company today is a husk of what it was. It's got, I think, about 15 or 20% the market capitalization of what it once had, and it's been broken up into three pieces. And that had to be done because the toxicity of the failed financial assets were so massive and so widespread through the company. It was at the point of Welch, it became 50% of what General Electric was doing. This was literally how they transformed themselves from a manufacturing company into a bank. But when that bank failed, it took the company down with it. And I should also point out, people ought not to remember, grab for your wallet. The taxpayers of this great country were forced during the early years of Obama to bail out the General Electric Corporation, the GE Bank, to an untold number of dollars. I believe it's in excess of $1 trillion, the recapitalization process. GE was allowed to go for more than a decade to the Federal Reserve directly and borrow money for free and use it to recapitalize. I'm unaware of any accounting for that. I wouldn't trust GE's accounting anyway. Maybe we shouldn't trust the Federal Reserve accounting. I'll also digress and say that the General Electric Company played a key role in the deformation of our accounting rules in the United States. Most folks wouldn't know this, but accounting rules in the public and private sector both are not laws. They're private regulations determined by an outfit called FASB, Financial Accounting Standards Board, and Government Accounting Standards Board. These are non-governmental pieces, but who sits on the boards of both of these things? Well, General Electric did. So it was just perverse that they were able to, in that case, massage the actual rules of accounting to suit themselves. And right. I think shame on the politicians. I have to get this in. People may remember President Obama, who I do not have fond memories of for many reasons. He was so enthralled, and his staff were so in love, in a sense of ecstasy almost with General Electric, that they put Jack Welch's successor, Jeff Immelt, they put him in charge of the White House Jobs Council. Wow. You want to talk about perversity. And I'm going to say this, I'm going to give the United Electrical Workers, myself and Ralph Nader, a great bit of credit here. We were the only forces that would take a public position against and confront that perversity. How dare the White House take a corporation like this, saturated with criminality, dedicated to the elimination of its jobs here in the United States, and then somehow put them in charge of the White House Jobs Council? You've got to be kidding. But this is what we face in today's political.
I mean, it
world.
would be like putting Elon Musk on a job council now. I mean, which is what Trump would like to do.
Well, and the Democrats may do it too. If he comes back and has a little love fest with the Democrats for 5 minutes, they're in love with this guy. They're the vogue of cutting jobs, making money, and looking like a rock star. It's hard for them to resist.
Well, and so, amid all this job cutting, you mentioned that UE, kind of valiantly fought back with more or less support from some of the other unions that represented GE workers. Could you, detail some of those attempts to fight back that were, ultimately, unfortunately, unsuccessful? UE was not able to single-handedly save GE from itself, and as you said, or as you alluded to earlier, GE's a shell of its former self. We can, if you have more details about the extent to which it's a shell, we can get into that later. But how did UE try to fight back, and to what extent was it supported or hampered by some of the other unions that represented GE? And to what extent, were there avenues available that could have been taken to stop GE, or was it all kind of predestined because of kind of the broader conditions of the time?
Yeah, good question, Jacob, because it relates directly to what the current battle is with Boeing. There's a lesson to be learned here, or at least to be made aware of. The United Electrical Workers led for several decades relentlessly an attempt to try to unify the different unions. Recall, the many different unions had been brought onto the scene during the McCarthy period with the direct collaboration of the General Electric Company, all dedicated to the destruction of UE as a militant, union that the company certainly didn't want to deal with any more than it had to. So this coalition of unions presents itself. Now, that's not the case with Boeing and the machinists and the engineers of the two unions primarily that deal with them. But we had to constantly try to rally these other union forces, as we were almost always fighting a rear guard defensive action. Layoffs, plant closings, investment shifts. And the company was also very skilled at introducing every kind of concessionary demand, every kind of speed up demand, every kind of newfangled, new wrapper around the same old thing, which was, hey, we want you to work harder for less. And it pervaded, the union negotiations. UE, to its great credit, stuck out as an unalterable foe of labor management cooperation in this context in concessions. And we had one of two national contracts, for those who know the distinction between a local contract and a national contract. So we really did fight as much as we could fight, but we couldn't control the big corporate decisions. So one of the larger divisions of, or larger sections of UE in the General Electric Company was the lighting industry, the light bulb industry. Well, it was eventually, systematically dismantled, allowed to wither, and then closed. And as we now know, it was in a very corrupt deal with the White House to bring in the new technology to exit incandescent bulbs and traditional fluorescent bulbs, and to move us into the CFL era, of which almost all of them are made overseas. There was actually, I found out, I was the one that dug this out, a very distinct antitrust collusion between the three lighting companies, General Electric, Osram, and the last one escapes me, Phillips, in order to manage wages and benefits of their workforces and exit that industry, and meaning exit the United States, with the complete support of the White House at that time, the Obama White House. Well, anyway, we did that. We had, tremendous frustration with this. I guess another one was, how did we deal with David Calhoun? He ran the transportation division for a brief time, a few years. UE's largest local at that time in General Electric was Local 506, a real fighting local in Erie, Pennsylvania, that manufactures locomotives and, at least in the past, also manufactured related products. But what the unions, UE in particular, in my experience, but also the other unions, we were constantly playing catch up and responding to these bombs that were going off as the company had deliberately decided to devour itself. Now, a lot of folks, the simple-minded among us, would sit around and say, "Oh, this just doesn't make sense. Why aren't they reinvesting in the United States? Why are they doing this? Why are they being so mean to us?" Well, a child, that's the observations of a child. It was very clear what they were doing. Anybody who's grown up and wanted to do a little homework, they were systematically milking out the manufacturing assets, disposing of them, selectively getting into new realms of employment, primarily financial, because it is so profitable, and then abandoning the communities and abandoning the mills, and the shareholders made out like bandits in all of this. And what really became apparent to us in UE by maybe 5 to 6 years into the reign of Jeffrey Immelt. Jeffrey Immelt took over immediately after Jack Welch, when he bowed out. It was clear to us that the company was headed for a crash of some kind. We didn't know exactly how or when, but when we had the 2008, 2009 crash in the United States, it took the company right down. And today, it's hard to say this, but today the United Electrical Workers does not represent a single working General Electric member. There are some left who were sold off, somehow ended up working for somebody else, and the union still represents them. Several thousand there, but there's not much. And the destruction that this corporate style of management, this ideology, has wreaked on the country is epic. And I'll jag back to Boeing. I have one thing to say to the machinists and anyone else who wants to. I will declare with no hesitation to say that the management ideology possessed by Boeing is determined to destroy, either deliberately or by design or by its result, the U.S. operations of Boeing. And I know for a number of years we discussed in UE, this company needs to be taken over somehow by the federal government. This needs to be stopped. Some force needs to intercede, because, of course, the shareholders are addicted to it. The media wouldn't report about it. The regulatory agency wouldn't investigate or prosecute it. For God's sakes, General Electric didn't even pay taxes. It had an 88,000-page IRS form, couldn't even be audited. It was so obfuscated and confused, GE just wasn't paying taxes to the federal government. In fact, it was receiving hundreds of millions of dollars every year and all kinds of corporate giveaways and whatnot, tax rebates and whatnot. So once it had reached that point, we knew that this was it. But look, in the United States, even today, to claim that a corporation like this has to be taken over, literally taken away from the people who are destroying it, seems like a fantastic notion. But the very existence of the Boeing Corporation is in great danger. And the machinists, in their furious bargaining and now striking against the company, see this. But this is the only thing that will stop this, because the shareholders love it. The shareholders are doing quite well in all of these situations. This is a well-executed plan. And, Boeing is different than General Electric in some key ways, but I don't think it's any different in this regard. As members of the flying public, we see this. How can this be that the quality is deteriorating, the schedule and the ability to produce these things it's because the company is never truly investigated and prosecuted for its crimes and for its regulatory violations. It's minimally harassed around the edges. Some scandals will come up, planes will crash, and people will be killed. But it's all dealt with as a cost of doing business. And it is the largest export company that we have in the United States, and it's the only significant large aircraft manufacturer left in the United States. So in a monopoly condition, it has carte blanche. to do what it wants, and they're doing it. And you see this through the strike. The company's quite confident. They're sitting there, take it from us. I mean, it's a very smug type of situation. So the kind of political intervention that's needed is something that exceeds the boundaries of the imagination of either political party. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the Republican Party in general would be in love with a Boeing, even with all of its criminality. The Democrats might be a little more confused, but their willingness to do anything is still non-existent. So this is a very dangerous moment. We've lived through this with the General Electric structure. Now we're seeing a potential version of this, not exact, but in many similarities with Boeing. And where's the Biden administration?
Right.
Well, and, you mentioned that, and I'm glad you did, about the idea of that there's going to have to be some sort of intervention if we want some sort of ultimate solution to the kind of criminality, whether it's actual legal criminality or just kind of moral criminality of the Boeing Corporation, and that's going to entail, you mentioned nationalization. Another option would be, turning ownership over to the workers in some sort of worker cooperative type of formation. But I'm totally in agreement with you that the ownership structure of these major companies do not lend themselves to being a responsible corporate actor. I mentioned that, all this talk about the Longshore strike, the fact that we had a group of executives who in this maritime shipping, ocean carrier alliance, who were giving themselves billion-dollar bonuses, and to try to not give in to the demands of the ILA, which were only to get close to the compensation of the ILWU on the West Coast. If you actually look at what was being asked for and what the ILWU already has, the idea that you have a class of people that have money to burn like that and are willing to put the entire global economy at risk to not pay those workers more, that signals to me such an irresponsibility on the part of these owners that not from, not as a socialist per se, right? Just from a stability of the capitalist system, right? If you want to save the capitalist system, you should be questioning the responsibility of these owners and questioning the idea that they should be left, these half a dozen people, in charge of such an enormously important institution to the global economy as the U.S. Maritime Alliance. And the same thing can be said with Boeing, although obviously to a smaller scale. But, the idea that you've got this small class of people that is willing to put, to some extent, the, national security, the economic security, and things like this at risk so that they don't have to pay their workers a little bit more, so that they don't have to make sure that their workers have a good retirement, they're not responsible enough to have this much power, right?
Right. Well, a couple comments on that, Jacob. The business literature in the country is business literature. It's not investigatory literature or something that's in the least bit impartial. But there's numerous books have been written about the General Electric Company and Jack Welch, and the vast majority of them are just cheerleading for his rock star status. And wow, look at the results, and boy, isn't he an interesting, new personality? I mean, and anyone that knew anything about Jack Welch, he was a dislikable ogre. It was just he even within the corporate management that I knew, there was no great personal warmth with anybody. He was just kind of an odd character in that regard. But there were two books written. One was written in 1998 by a guy, Tom Boyle. It was called At Any Cost, Jack Welch and the Jack Welch General Electric and the Pursuit of Profit. 1998, we had a book that at least mildly dealt with some of these issues. And it was buried It never was a bestseller. The business community wasn't interested in it. None of the investors were. But Boyle went into some of these things. Now, the flaw of his book was, and the flaw of all of them, they never talked to the union. None of the folks that write these articles and books ever pick up the phone or go visit any of the unions because it's not in their nature. Maybe they also can't get published if they actually talk to the union. But a book in 2022, all the way up to the current period, David Gellis wrote a book called The Man Who Broke Capitalism. The Man Who Broke Capitalism. This was sort of a post-debacle assessment of Jack Welch, and he was the man who broke capitalism. Well, for listeners, capitalism isn't broken. Capitalism works incredibly well. What's going on? What happened to General Electric was a pharaoh's fortune was squeezed out of that corporation. That's what the investors wanted. That's what they got. They don't give a damn that the company has been destroyed and everybody who was part of it was thrown into turmoil. That's not their issue. And this is the same with Boeing. We have to, in the United States, as workers, as citizens, we have to change our thinking about the way we think about these corporations. Boeing, let's transition back to Boeing. It was run by David Calhoun, a GE devotee of Jack Welch. Brian West, the CFO is still there. This is the private equity mindset that saturates these companies, many more than just Boeing. There's a reason why our country's being systematically hollowed out. This is part of it. And so anyone somehow inclined to treat the Boeing leadership with any sense of legitimacy is incorrect, wrong, and dangerously wrong. And here comes the Machinists Union battling this in a strike scenario. As you were saying earlier, I mean, we have a wage package that's lagged dramatically. We have a pension that was lost. Well, these workers are angry. They should be angry. These workers are PO'd. This is why in almost unanimity, they have rejected a settlement with this company because there never was a single financial justification for any of the backward steps that they took. Right. And now it's incredibly expensive to catch up. Wages that have lagged are expensive for the company to catch up. A pension that was lost is even more expensive. I seem to be amongst some of the very few that understand how pensions work. And once it's lost, it becomes exponential in its expense to revisit it. But the fact is, these workers and the International Association of Machinists are waging an absolutely valiant struggle against a company that is modeled along the lines of General Electric, the private equity model, the too big to fail model. Boeing has not chosen to go down the route of banking that General Electric did. It instead has decided to go down the route of monopoly. And also military contracts. Let's get this on the record. The most super profitable contracts of all, money for nothing, practically, really. So this company is, the leadership of this corporation is maneuvering itself into the deep end. And ultimately, the workers and the communities where those workers are, the traveling public, which is most of us, and the country itself will pay a steep price for our unwillingness to examine the real intricacies and workings of this company, which I have no problem saying is saturated with unethical behavior, criminal behavior, this managing of earnings, tax evasion. I mean, these things are pervasive amongst U.S. corporations, and we just don't even, it just is remarkable to me. Maybe not, every day and week and month in the United States, we reach some new low in this regard. So it's hard to act astonished. But the seeming regulatory immunity of this company is a big piece. And the Biden administration like the previous Trump regime. They go along with this, they get along with this, they hope it or wish it away. Then they believe what these corporate leaders tell them. And I guess in the case of this one, the only difference is compared to GE, every time any of these people get on a plane that's manufactured by Boeing, it is on their mind. So are we going to get there? Am I going to live through this? So that's of a new type, and in any case, all support is owed to those workers in that corporation. They are up against a monster, a smiling monster, but a monster nonetheless, and a politically immune monster, but a monster nonetheless. It directly comes down from the General Electric legacy and sort of a twin toxic legacy of private equity, destroying the company in order to wring out its value. And so back on the book, The Man Who Broke Capitalism. No, this is what capitalism is about today. And it's going to remain that way until we challenge it.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. As we're rounding out here, Chris, is there anything else that you think is important for people to understand about David Calhoun? Maybe you can go into what's some of the cloud that Calhoun left Boeing under. If you could elaborate on that a little bit, or if there's anything else about the new Boeing CEO and his connections to GE that you would want to underscore, and then anything else that you would want to say about the strike before we let you go.
Yeah, thanks. A couple things for listeners. The Calhoun, he's one of 1,000 who were trained at the feet of Jack Welch and then transitioned to private equity, and he is a product of that. A very dangerous individual. Based on what? Based on, in the case of Boeing, this mania to acquire. They acquired McDonnell Douglas, one of their only remaining competitors, and then they want to integrate it into the company, squeeze it up, close it down, move part of the operations to South Carolina, which made no sense. There was nothing wrong with the operations in Washington State, but it was all a money grab by this guy. So this guy is something. And I should say, all of these devotees of Jack Welch, these management devotees who have proliferated. People forget that it was a very coveted position to work for General Electric, because once you had put 4, 5, 6 years in as a GE manager someplace, you could write your own ticket anywhere. All these large companies wanted some of that magic from Jack Welch and General Electric. So it was almost a resume builder for a lot of these folks. Again, that's how Dave West got to, the CFO today of Boeing is one of them. Again, and let's not forget that. People think that the GE legacy was somehow cut off or reversed with the exit of Calhoun. But one of the many ways that an ordinary person would recognize that something is wrong here was exactly Calhoun's experience. You will see, and you'll see also in Boeing, common now in corporate America, you'll see the upper echelons of management having. These are truly, if you believe them, and I don't, these are truly Renaissance people. What do I mean by that? David Calhoun presumably, he ran the GE transportation division. So I guess that means I'm supposed to believe that he was an expert and an authority on railroad locomotives and the various products that they make. No, he's not. No, he never was. He ran the aircraft engine. He was a busy man. He had a second career. He then went and ran the aircraft engine, and I presume, no. You see that where I'm going with this. I mean, we're an industrial corporate hierarchy in the United States today, not dominated by anybody who is an authority about what it is the company happens to be doing, whether that be manufacturing or service. These folks are placeholders in a mining to get hold of that value that was built up over decades, and then fly off with it or deliver it to the folks who sponsored it. And this also explains how you find these CEOs and these higher level managers that go from one debacle to the next to the next. Well, they're not debacles. These are by design. These are very profitable debacles, profitable for the people who are walking away with it. So Calhoun is not even worth any greater examination. This guy is a disastrous force. He's now been pushed to the edge. He's not, I understand he's still actually there. He'll be there till the end of the year. Incredibly dangerous moment that we're in. He's out of the limelight doing what? Before he exits. And of course, Brian West is still there, the CFO. And folks may think it's hyperbole. I don't. I think that this company is in grave danger from these forces who captured it and who control it. And the machinists are doing the very best that they can from their perch to push back against these things. And I think anybody listening, this is your safety at stake as the flying public. As you see this company beginning to do bizarre things, and dangerous things, and reckless things, they don't think so because they've got even more money to parcel out to their shareholders. So this is one of those moments that you can't avoid thinking about. And we have to support the machinists. They deserve, substantial wage catch up. And they deserve, those workers that lost the pension or never had it, they deserve a real pension. I don't care what it costs. It doesn't matter what it costs. What's the purpose of this corporation? What's its place in our economy and in our society? Because again, like I said, none of these things were lost because of any financial necessity. These are incredibly wealthy companies. So anyway, beware the legacy of the General Electric Company. I encourage folks to examine it. Examine Jack Welch. What you'll see, you will not like, but know that he is worshipped by the business community. He is worshipped by the political elites in both parties. That also is a real crisis for us here in the United States.
Yep. Really appreciate your time, Chris. Your wealth of knowledge as always.
Thank you.
All right, folks. That's going to be it for us. That's going to be it for our conversation with Chris Townsend. We got a little bit longer to go, but yeah, really appreciated him taking the time, and obviously really appreciate the fight that the machinists are putting on and the support that the engineers over there at SPIA are giving them. Like I said, at the top, $99,000 donation. That's a really exciting amount of solidarity. The only thing that I would say as far as things that I wish I could see from the strike was more of, what Chris was talking about as far as an attempt to really coordinate in bargaining and, make more use of their leverage together. When I spoke to the engineer union's communications director, communications lead, he mentioned that aligning the contracts would be a very difficult thing, and it would, but and I didn't want to push him further, not really interested in doing that or making people uncomfortable, but it did seem like there was just it's just not that just wasn't a conversation that was happening, or how can we line up our contracts as unions at Boeing to exact the most leverage from the company as possible. And I think it's kind of interesting at this juncture that it seems like potentially the engineers not being on strike is giving the machinists more leverage than if they had been on strike, because Boeing was asking for a furlough of the machinists and the machinists refused, and so I don't know, maybe it's not as big a deal as I think it would be, but I just think about what what Teamsters at UPS were able to win, what the UAW at the Big Three were able to win because of their nationally aligned contracts. And it seems like that should be one of the first things that you think of when you start thinking about systematically fighting back against this huge corporation and getting as much leverage on the side of the workers as you possibly can. And it just doesn't seem like at least that conversation is happening. Obviously, lots of commendable support for the machinists from the engineers union and some of the other unions and all of that stuff. So yeah, obviously not being too critical, but that's something that I'd be interested in knowing, I guess, why that's not more of a conversation than it is maybe. But nevertheless, Teresa's either the wife of a striking machinist or is a striking machinist herself. I apologize for not remembering, but she says, I remember the first time SPIA actually went on strike. We were shocked. They have become much more of a force over the last 10 to 15 years. That's really cool. I'm super glad to hear that. Kale says, don't forget Boeing owns the regulators in the government and also the union leaders. I don't know about the union leaders necessarily, but understand the concern. Kel says it is only the people in the union as the stopgap to all this, and that's absolutely true. The union members are the only ones that are going to be able to stop this.
Well, I mean, I would argue more broadly, it's unions that are really the only thing that can save us from these destructive forces in our country, right? I mean, working people coming together, building our own institutions, building our own power through unions is, for my money and in my estimation, the best chance we have to save this country and to deal with this crisis, because this GE nonsense that Chris was talking about, it has spread throughout, and it is a symptom of a broader system, and it really is reflective of kind of the past 50 years of neoliberalism and this broader decline. We brought it up earlier. Wages have been relatively stagnant for 50 years. Productivity has skyrocketed, and unionism has declined significantly, but the concentration of wealth has increased significantly. And so if we are going to fight back against oligarchy, unions are how we're going to do it. Unions are human institutions, right? So they're not perfect. And neither are the leaders necessarily, because, again, they're human institutions. They're only going to be as good as the humans in them and the humans leading them, and it's tough and messy. Democracy is really tough and messy, but as democratic working class institutions, unions are uniquely positioned to help us, right? To help us fight back against this concentration of wealth and power that we're dealing with, that has no regard for our communities, our future, anything.
Right. I put the Zoom link in the chat one more time. Adam, do we have anybody in the Zoom wanting to call in?
No.
Okay. All right. You have any other anything else that you wanted to make sure that we got to before we wrapped up?
I just have a few parting things. I just wanted to mention a couple things as we wrap up. September 15th was the first official day of Hispanic Heritage Month, so I did want to acknowledge that. It starts on the anniversary of independence for 5 Latin American countries: Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And September 30th was the anniversary of the founding of the National Farm Workers Association. Activists led by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta founded the National Farm Workers Association, NFWA, which is now known as the United Farm Workers. And it was in order to support and defend the rights of farm workers to decent working conditions and wages. The NFWA acted for change through strikes, boycotts, marches, and fasts, and is also known for mobilizing the Chicano movement in the U.S. Among other things, their wins included securing the California Agricultural Labor Relations Act, CALRA, which is a landmark statute in United States labor law that was enacted by the state of California back in 1975. It established the right to collective bargaining for farm workers in the state, a first in U.S. history. Of course, there was the famous grape strike back in '65, though a lot of folks don't know the initial organizers were actually Filipino. So with those anniversaries in mind and, the fact that it is Hispanic Heritage Month, I just wanted to also point out a few current statistics. 9% of Hispanic workers are union members, which is slightly below the national average of 10%, though in 2023, Latinos had the largest increase in union membership among women. Growing union membership is especially important for women. When you look at the data, you find that union members and those represented by unions have higher wages compared to their non-union counterparts. You know that, right? Women receive a bigger bump than men, and the union bump is especially large for Latinas. Among full-time Latino workers, union members typically make $1,041 each week, compared to just $776 each week among non-union workers, a bump of 34%, or almost $14,000 a year. That's a hell of a bump, a 34% bump to be in the union. And these higher wages mean union workers have smaller wage gaps than non-union workers. For example, among full-time workers, women who are not in unions are typically paid just 83 cents for every dollar paid to men, while among union members, women are paid 88 cents to a man's dollar, right? 5 cents better. Not perfect, but 5 cents better. That is important to see those wage gaps decrease. Improving union membership for women is essential beyond the higher wages and closing racial and gender pay gaps. Women union members have more access to essential benefits like paid leave, pensions, and health coverage, benefits that women are especially likely to lack. And unions have initiated efforts to support access to reproductive health care and gender-affirming care. Yet, as membership numbers make clear, women have not always benefited as much from unions as men have in terms of membership. Women's union membership, especially union membership for Latinas and Asian women, still lags behind men's, and many of the high-profile union actions that we've seen over the past year or so were in male-dominated industries like auto manufacturing and transportation. The working class is incredibly diverse. We are the majority. Most people are working class, and we are the most diverse class of people. So most Hispanic folks are workers. Unions are for workers. Unions are how workers can improve our lives, how we can come together to build our power, which is how we make these positive changes, like higher wages, like better benefits, right? So we as a labor movement must be intentional and ensure we are reaching out to folks in the fast-growing Hispanic community, which itself is incredibly diverse. So we have to grow our membership, period. But we also need to make sure we are intentional in growing our membership in the Hispanic community. And, something that I know Jacob and I have talked about through this project is we would love to have Spanish language content, right? We would love to work with someone and put out some of this content in Spanish to reach new audiences. If you're willing to give us money to do that, please let us know. That's really the biggest holdup there. Just need funding to, carry out a project like that. But, I thought with it being Hispanic Heritage Month, I wanted to just put some of that out there. I think we just have a lot of work to do when it comes to just maintaining and improving diversity within our unions, ensuring that we have a pipeline of new leaders, right? That not only are we reaching out to folks, but we're getting them involved, and we're getting them involved and stepping up as leaders, right? So they can go back and work with their communities and their networks and their families. It's going to be really important that we do that. Our movement has to reflect the working class. So wanted to put that out there. I do know it is also October is Disability Employment Awareness Month. Wanted to mention that. The other big thing, I for sure wanted to give a shout out to Starbucks Workers United for organizing their 500th store across the country. Really, really cool. I know we are working on getting some information out from the North Alabama Area Labor Council, hopefully get some press next week to honor and celebrate those efforts. There are 2 unionized Starbucks in Alabama. One is in Birmingham, the first one, and then the other one is in Scottsboro, which is a pretty small town in rural northeast Alabama. Sort of an unlikely place for that struggle to take place. And the youngest member of the organizing committee was only 16 at the time, which I find really remarkable. A lot of young folks have been involved in this Starbucks unionization wave across the country, but, including here in Alabama and across the South. We've seen Starbucks organize in New Orleans. There was a store in Nashville organizing just recently. So it continues to spread. I think it's really important that we see that continue to spread. I'm really impressed that it is a very dynamic young movement. Many of the folks organizing these stores are, teenagers. They're in their 20s. I think that's really important because we've seen the opinion polls show that folks under 30 are, just super, super into unions. That's what all the polls show. But, translating that into action is something different, right? It's one thing to say you're into unions or that you think they're a good thing, but actually being part of one, knowing how to be a part of one, and in a tougher situation, actually starting your own, that's a whole nother thing. So it's been really cool just from my perspective as someone who's been in this movement for, about a dozen years now, and am, increasingly at that age where I no longer count in the youth caucus, so to speak. It's been really cool to see young people stepping up and organizing in places like Starbucks, because why shouldn't baristas have a good living, right? Why shouldn't these jobs be good union jobs? If we organize, we can make them that way. And I'm just really impressed. So shout out Starbucks Workers United. They picked up their 500th store. Also wanted to shout out SEIU for their support of them. Appreciate the leadership there. I know they just announced they are spending $50 million to organize in the South. Hope Alabama sees some of that money. We would love to help grow the union movement in Alabama, across the South, but, particularly here in the state. We've got a lot of room to grow, a lot of potential. So SEIU, if you're listening, hit us up. We'll help you find targets. We got some ideas. Other than that, I want to make a final plug for the Alabama Troublemaker School. It is Saturday, October 19th. If you can drive to Birmingham, make sure you can make it there. Saturday, October 19th. You can go to labornotes.org/events. While you're there, check out some of the other free and low-cost trainings. I know just this past week they had What to Do When Your Union Breaks Your Heart. That's always a good one. They do that on a pretty regular basis. And I was on America's Workforce Radio this past week. I'm not sure if the episode is out yet, so just keep your eyes peeled for that. Always appreciate collaborating with Flash and the team over at America's Workforce. Good union talk show on 5 days a week. Don't forget, you can leave us a voicemail throughout the week, 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Would love to get some voicemails. If you've got thoughts, if you've got disagreements even, if there's something you liked or something you didn't like, give us a call, leave us a voicemail. I know some people get nervous going live on the air, right? Maybe don't want to call in. But yeah, leave us a voicemail throughout the week. We'd love to play that on the next episode. Don't forget to like and share and subscribe, give us good reviews. All that stuff really does help. Our website is tvlr.fm. Make sure you're on our email list and can stay up to date. And Jacob, that is all I have for folks.
And with that, we'll see you next week.